Hello, this is Melissa, the insurance exam queen, and we are going to be doing a lesson on dwelling and homeowners insurance. So depending on what state you're in, this can vary as to how much it's on your exam. Like in some states, dwelling may only be 5% or up to 17%. Same with, but homeowners is always really big. Homeowners is usually around 15 to 30% of the exam in some cases, but learning dwelling in its entirety helps you understand homeowners in its entirety. So even if dwelling is a pretty small section on your exam, it's still good to know it because it helps you with all the policies anyway. You have dwelling, homeowners, and commercial all are property policies. So and I encourage people to mainly focus on dwelling and homeowners instead of commercial package policies, because learning dwelling and homeowners is like 30 to 40 pages each, like a total, and then whereas like learning commercial is like hundreds of pages to study that material. So, and then in some states, if you look at your exam breakdown and you're in a state where it doesn't tell you dwelling, homeowners, commercial, it just says types of property, dwelling and homeowners make up about half of those points on that. And if you know dwelling and homeowners, you don't have to be very strong in commercial. So I heavily emphasize knowing dwelling and homeowners. But by knowing dwelling and homeowners, it will get you points on commercial because they're all property policies and they all have similar, common themes among them all. Like once you learn how we cover property damage, oh, that's the wall, with property damage, you pay for the walls and the roof, things like that. It's kind of all the same across all of the policies. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about real quick, we need to refresh ourselves if we don't already remember, is what a peril is. Because what makes a policy, what determines what is covered on a policy is the perils. The perils decide, or the policy is different according to perils. Like that's what makes a policy different, is the perils that it will cover. So let's remind ourselves what a peril is. A peril is the cause of loss. It's the reason why we file a claim. Some examples of perils are going to be fire, lightning, wind, hail. So fire, lightning, wind, hail, even flood is a peril. It's like anything that can happen to the structure in a bad way is a peril. Peril is like danger. When you're, when you're in a peril, it's danger, or it's perilous. If something is perilous, it's dangerous. So a peril is like a bad thing that happens to you. It's the reason that you file a claim. The fire, the lightning, the wind, the hail, the riot, the vehicle, the explosion, the smoke, the earth movement, the volcano. It's the things that can happen to you that would cause you to file a claim. Now, when you purchase a homeowner's policy or a dwelling, there are two main versions of a policy, and it is going to be named peril, and open peril, named peril and open peril. You either buy a policy that is named peril, or you buy a policy that is open peril. Okay. When we see these, we want to think named peril is a policy where the peril has to be named to be covered. A named peril policy is a policy that says if the peril is going to be covered, it's named right here. Basically, a named peril policy lists the perils that it covers. It lists the perils that it covers, or one way to think of that, triggers it, or that it responds to. Because we kind of get confused sometimes with perils versus coverage, because you're either covered for a peril or not. But with the policy, your peril is what will trigger the coverage to be active or not. So the peril literally will turn on the policy's coverage. So if my policy covers fire, and the peril of fire happens, bing, my policy turns on and provides coverage. Imagine your insurance policy is kind of like a sleep. It's sleeping. There's nothing going on. Everything is fine at your household. Your policy is just sleeping there, waiting for an emergency, because your policy really only comes out during emergencies. So you have your little insurance policy sleeping in your closet, is not doing anything. A peril happens, bing, it wakes up. And that's when it's like, we gotta provide coverage. We gotta do things. So a peril is a policy trigger, and not every peril is covered, but on a named peril policy, it lists the perils that it covers, or another way to say it, that triggers. It triggers the policy to provide coverage. So it lists the perils that it covers, that triggers coverage is another way to say that. And the funny way to say it is, if it ain't named, it ain't covered. If it ain't named, it ain't covered. It has to be named in order to be covered. A named peril must be named to be covered. A named peril policy must name the peril. And if it does not name the peril, it's not covered. Okay. So named peril, this is what's covered. So a named peril policy will be like fire, lightning, wind. And those will be the only, like whatever is named will trigger, will wake up the policy to turn it on. But if fire, lightning is the only two that is listed and a flood happens, your policy is staying asleep. It's not triggered yet. The peril is what will trigger it. So a named peril lists the perils that it covers. And on the other side, you can have what is called open peril. Open peril is open to any peril. Open peril is open to any peril. So instead of naming it, it just says we cover them all. So an open peril policy covers every peril not excluded. Now, every policy has exclusions. In fact, that was a test question that I practiced today with one of my royal treatment clients who pays to work with me one-on-one, and every single person who has passed their exam the first time up to today at this point. So if this is being recorded later, I want you to know, as of this point, oh, that's so amazing to know myself as a teacher, that every person I've worked one-on-one with like that has passed their first time. But anyway, she had a question and it said, what is excluded on both, like, or something about an exclusion. And it was comparing like a 2 and a 3. And she's like, well, named peril policy doesn't have exclusions because it only covers what's named. And if it's not named, it's not covered. So a named peril doesn't have exclusions. And I'm like, oh my gosh, every policy has exclusions. Let me clarify that right now. Every policy has exclusions. They all have exclusions. Your life insurance has an exclusion. Your health insurance has an exclusion. Auto, home, every single policy has an exclusion for sure. And the two main exclusions to always remember with dwelling and homeowners and property and commercial and all of them is earth movement and water damage. Now, there are more exclusions: power failure, war, neglect, intentional damage. But the two main ones that they ask about the most is earth movement and water damage. And that's on a named and an open. They all have exclusions. An open peril policy, though, just has a lot more. An open peril policy says they are open to any peril. I am open to any peril. As soon as any peril happens, bing, policy wakes up, provides coverage. Okay. So an open peril policy is a policy that will respond, that can be triggered by every possible peril unless it's excluded. So an open peril will have a much longer exclusion list. Okay, so because there's no policy that will cover absolutely everything all the time. There's always going to be an exclusion. So with open peril, it covers every peril not excluded, and it will have a long exclusion list. But again, the only two you need to focus on is earth movement and water damage. Okay, so again, in order to really fully understand dwelling and homeowners, we have to come back to remind ourselves what a peril is. A peril is a cause of loss. It is the reason that we are filing a claim. It's the fire, the lightning, the wind, the hail. And a policy will only cover a peril if that peril is covered. And we know it's covered whether you have a named or an open. A named peril policy will list the perils. It will say you are covered for fire, lightning, internal explosion. That's it. So any of these three perils, if they happen, policy wakes up, provides coverage. If anything else happens, this policy is going to do nothing, because this policy only responds to the named perils, and the named perils are fire, lightning, and internal explosion. On the other side of the spectrum, you have an open peril policy, which says we are open to every peril, and it will cover every peril not excluded. Now, when it comes to a dwelling and a homeowners, we get a nice little memory trick that allows us to remember which policies are named and which ones are open. Because between dwelling and homeowners, there are there's like 10 different policies you got to remember. I don't know, 8 or 9, 10, something. They're not exactly numbered in order. So there's 3 dwelling that you have to remember, and there's like 8 homeowners that you have to remember. So that's 11-ish policies. You need to know which ones are named and which ones are open, and they're all over the place. So here is the easiest way to know. There's only one exception. There's always an exception, always in insurance. There's always an exception to like everything I even teach. And here's the exception. Well, I'm just going to remind us that there is an exception. Yeah, over here. Yeah, I'll figure out how I put that. Okay, anyway, named peril. I got to decide where I want to put that on the chart. A named peril. We know the policy is going to be a named peril policy if the name of the policy is an even number. Even numbered policies. That means if you have a DP2, that's an even number. An even number is a number that can be divided by 2 equally. So like 2, right? I can evenly break that and have 1 and 1. If I have 3, there's no place that I could break it that it would be even. But if I had 4, if I had 4 things, that can be easily divided into 2. So an even number is something that can be divided in half and have equal parts on both sides. So that would be a 2, a 4, a 6, an 8. 2, 4, 6, 8. Each of those is easily divisible by 2. That makes it an even number. Even numbers are named peril. If you don't know, I have had people say, I don't know what an even number is. Then just remember a 2, a 4, a 6, an 8 is a named peril policy. Okay. So even numbered policies, a DP2, an HO2, an HO4, an HO6, and an HO8. We will learn all of those in a minute, okay? But those are all named peril policies. So if a named peril policy is a number that is even and easily divisible by 2, an open peril is odd, where it's not. That's the odd one, where if I have 3 and I try to cut it in half, I can't. I can only do it like this, okay? I can only get, it's going to be odd. There's going to be 2 on one side, 1 on another, no matter how I cut it. No matter how I slice it, it's odd. That's an odd number, and it's O for open. Open, odd, numbered policies. Okay, so that's going to be an HO3 and an HO5. Okay, so you have, and that's O for, that's odd, right? Oh, so that's a 3 and a 5. Okay. So your named peril policies are even numbered 2, 4, 6, 8. Odd number policy or open peril policies are odd numbers, and that's going to be a 3 and a 5. Our one exception to this is called a there's one exception to this named peril, open peril, even number, odd number thing, and that is, we're going to just make a little thing here, DP1. So, well, yeah, we want to put it, sorry, I'm thinking about the best place to put this, because there is an exception with the odd number, is that a DP1 is named peril. This is the one exception to the rule, because a DP1 is a very odd, weird policy is not, well, it's not weird. The policy itself is extremely simple. And that's what makes it weird, because homeowners has all these amazing things to it. It has all these amazing coverages, which when you're talking to your people, make sure that you boost up these coverages that we're going to talk about. Like right now, my friend is dealing with, the hurricane coming in. We talked about what coverage does she have? Will your policy pay for a hotel for you if they make you evacuate, and what kind of coverages? Like we get to talk about those things with the people that we're selling these policies to. But anyway, that was going off on a tangent. A DP1 is named peril. A DP1 is very, very simple. It's like basic Bob, very simplified policy, not a lot of coverages. It breaks a lot of rules that we have, like tree coverage. Almost every policy is $500. All the policies have tree coverage, but a DP1 is the only one that doesn't have tree coverage. So it's a weirdo. So the DP1 is a named peril. It is an odd number. One is odd. You can't divide one in half evenly. So it is an odd number, but it is named peril. So DP1 is named peril. It is the one exception, and it has a lot of exceptions. Okay, so now we want to talk about the different coverage types, or now let's just jump right on into homeowners versus dwelling. Okay, now a couple of things about dwelling and homeowners, which are the same, like they both share this, is that they can be up to 4 units. Up to 4 units. And what we mean by that is you could have a single family home. You could have a duplex where it's one house, but it's one building, but 2 individual houses in it. And that could be an upstairs, downstairs, or it could be a side by side, but it's 2 houses in one building. And that's a duplex. You could have a triplex where there's 3 houses in one building, kind of like when you think of a townhouse or a row house. Or you can have a up to 4 separate units. And that means that like on a homeowners, you would live in the downstairs unit, and then you could have 3 tenants living in the 3 other units. Like you could be renting out these properties and have a homeowners or a dwelling policy. But that's what we mean by up to 4 individual units. And then additionally, what else is the same is that you can have a service-based business. And so before I write what I'm going to write there, I'm going to explain this a little bit so it makes sense. On the dwelling and homeowners, you are allowed to have a business at your house, but it is the only way they cover it is if the business is incidental. And what incidental means is like off to the side. It's not the main purpose. The main purpose of your house is that you live there and sleep there, not run a business. So incidental means it's not the main purpose, it's on the side. So if it's on the side, it's incidental. Perfect. The other thing is that it has to be service-based. A service is like cutting and styling my hair. It is not allowed to be retail-based. Retail is Walmart. I walk into Walmart, I buy a product, and then I leave. So retail is buying stuff and leaving. Service-based is getting a service like my hair wash, my nails done, computer repair, cell phone repair, any sort of where they're doing something for you. Whereas retail is buying a product off the shelf. They don't like retail. You're not allowed to do retail at home, but you are allowed to have a service-based business, even tutoring, piano lessons, photography, stuff like that. That is all allowed at the house. Now, one, you want to know, you need to know those rules. Service-based business And no more than 2 people working at any one time is another rule. So if you're running a salon, like let's say you converted your garage into a salon and you have 3 chairs that are available, you're only allowed to have 2 active chairs. So you guys, say only 2 people can be working at any one time. Only 2 people can be cutting hair when it's a service-based business. And that's for any type of service, whatever it is, but only 2 people can be actively working. Now, it is covered on the homeowners and the dwelling at a very minimal level. And you can buy coverage on it. You can get an endorsement, and an endorsement is adding extra coverage onto your policy. You can get more coverage via the endorsement that says better protect this incidental service-based business. And that is called permitted incidental occupancies. So the name of the endorsement that expands the service-based business coverage that your dwelling and homeowners have is called permitted incidental occupancies. And you want to remember service-based and no more than 2 people working at any one time. And both the dwelling and the homeowners have coverage for that. Okay. Sorry, I need a drink of water. So we're going to write incidental service-based business. Incidental service-based business. And then you could add a little, if you need the extra memory tips, then add in no retail. And then you can also add in, keep it red. No retail, no more than 2 people. 2 people. Okay. So no retail, no more than 2 people for the service-based business. Okay. So dwelling and homeowners up to 4 residential units does also cover incidental service-based business. And another thing that we want to say here for dwelling and homeowners is no farm. It doesn't cover anything related to farm. And you're likely to see at least, a question on that dwelling and homeowner. If they say you have a dwelling and homeowners policy and something happens with the farm equipment, like no, or like what happens with the I don't know. If you have a farm question, I don't focus on questions very much myself personally. That's kind of a side tangent here. But when you're practicing with the exam and you're learning and studying, trying to sometimes doing questions is certainly helpful and you need to do them, but don't make them the way that you study. It's better to know the information than to know the questions, because the practice exams and the practice questions that you have will not be the same exact ones on the state. So I generally avoid working on questions or talking about questions or writing my own questions, because if you at least know the material, you should be able to answer any question on it. But anything about farm coverage on a dwelling or homeowners and farm, it's not covered. Another thing it doesn't cover is land. There's no land coverage. So the dwelling and homeowners cover the structure that is sitting on the land, but it doesn't cover the land itself or the value of the land. What it does cover, though, about the land is the liability on the land. So liability is something that you are guilty for, you are responsible for, you caused harm to someone else. And that when you say liability, you're saying I am liable, you're saying I'm responsible. Liable, responsible. If I am liable, I am responsible. It's my fault, I'm guilty. Okay, liability, I'm guilty. Liability, I'm guilty. So the liability of the land is covered. So for instance, right now, hunting season is about to start here in Illinois. And if you have a piece of land that is used just for farming and you have people go on the land and they go hunting and they get hurt, and it's something that's your fault, then they could, you know, potentially sue you. Your homeowners can and will pay out for a valid, you know, legitimate claim. But what it will not cover is the actual land itself. So if the land itself like gets hurt somehow, or, you know, polluted or whatever, they don't cover land. They just cover the liability of the land. If someone gets hurt or injured on the land, that is covered, but not the actual land or property itself. Okay. All right. So that is the same between those. There's more similarities, but those are the ones, again, in my teaching, I will gear towards what matters the most. So when you're taking your online course in your, you know, your, whoever it is, who your pre-licensing provider is, you know, you're reading a online website, hopefully Excel, because you get a discount code with them if you use me. And the practice exam, when you're reading all of that, they have to tell you like everything about that concept, because that is what is required of a state approved course. I am not state approved. I simply teach the material that shows up on the within those courses and on the test in a way that, you know, you can understand it. And then I also know what the things they're likely going to be asking you about, right? So what will you actually be seeing? Will you be seeing these teeny tiny intricate details on the exam that I have to study? I'm like 40 bullet points into exclusion and my eyes are like twitching and I'm like, oh my gosh, do I really need to know this? No, you don't. You don't need to know that. You don't need to know that. You just need to know the things that I talk about. And that's why my royal treatment clients, when they pass with like a 71, like a 72, like exactly what you need to be able to pass, because that is what I focus in on. Like I really aim in on the things you need to know. So are there more common things between dwelling and homeowners? Yeah. But what's most important is these, and that's why I write them in the notes. And if I'm writing it, I encourage you to write it to learn the material. Okay. So what is coverages? So we talked about perils and how a policy is based on the whether it will cover a peril or not cover a peril. And then there are different types of policies after that, and they are generally ranked by their perils and what they will cover. And then also by the type of property that they are, because there's a difference, for instance, between a house and a condo. A house is a singular building standing by itself. A condo is a unit in a building with a bunch of other units, and this is huge building. And the condo unit owner only owns one unit. So there has to be some differences in the policy types. So there will be differences between all the different versions of a homeowners. And mostly the differences are related to perils. So what is covered on a dwelling and a homeowners is like very similar to each other. So let's go over the coverages that we have on the dwelling and the homeowners. So we're writing out coverages. And coverages is basically what it will pay out for. What is it paying out for? Not what you have the peril that triggers it. So like fire triggers the policy to provide coverage. What is the coverage? What are we actually getting if a claim happens and our policy is taking care of it? When we say that you buy homeowners, your house burns down, we will rebuild it. How and what does that look like? Where does that money come from? How do they determine that money? That's what coverages are all about. So the first coverage that we have is coverage A. Oops, you were too skinny. Coverage A, coverage A. You know, I kind of want to, before I get too far, my goal is to give you this beautiful chart as a study tool. So I want to make sure it looks good for you. and I need to move this over. Slow down. Okay. Coverage A, coverage A. Okay, we're going to give us text and visuals. Coverage A is known as structure. No, sorry, dwelling. Sorry. Dwelling. I know that is funny because a dwelling policy is also dwelling. So what the heck? Okay. Dwelling, when they say dwelling, a dwelling means the house, the walls and the roof, the house. And a dwelling policy is focused on just the walls and the roof of the house. Really, truly, a dwelling policy is actually what is the difference between a dwelling and the homeowners? We've talked about what's the same. What the heck is different? A dwelling policy only really cares about the walls and the roof. Like that's the main point of a dwelling policy, because dwelling policies are typically used and purchased by landlords, people who own the walls and the roof, but they're renting it out to tenants. So someone who doesn't own the house is living in the house. And whose stuff then is going to be in the house? It's going to be the people living there, the tenants. The landlord is not responsible for your stuff. You are responsible for your stuff. The landlord is only responsible for the walls and the structure of the house. But your couch, furniture, shoes, clothing, all of that is your responsibility. So a landlord, he doesn't take care of your stuff. He only needs to care about the walls and the roof. A homeowner's policy says that whoever owns the structure is living in the house, and that it is that means that it makes it your walls and your stuff. So it makes it your walls and your stuff. So you're covering both, not only the outside of the house, the walls and the roof of the house, you're also covering all the stuff, the clothes, clothes, furniture, everything. Like if you were to take your house and you turn it upside down and everything falls out, everything that would fall out is your stuff. And dwelling doesn't come with that, because dwelling is purchased by a landlord and all he cares about is the walls and the roof. So
it's so funny that you say that, because I got a question on my I'm sorry, my daughter's in the background.
Oh, you're fine.
I got a question in my New York exam that said a person purchased a 2-unit home for rental. Which coverage would they need? And one of the answers was homeowners or dwelling. And I chose dwelling because it's for rental, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now you can be a homeowner and rent the other side, but that it sounded like with that question, it was said a 2-unit rental, they're renting both sides, then it has to be dwelling. Right. Because here's why. This is the key difference between a dwelling and a homeowner. So we talked about what makes them the same, but we forgot to say what makes them different. What is different between these two is that a homeowner says that you must live there. So it must be owner occupied. Owner occupied. Let's change that color. Let's make it a bright one. No, it's got to be different from that color. Let's do yellow. That's fine. All right. Owner occupied. Owner occupied. Whereas dwelling says it doesn't matter. Like they don't care who lives there really. So there's no requirement to be owner occupied. So let's put over here, we're going to put landlords, because that's what's most important there. And you should know the definition of a landlord living in America, I guess, but landlord is somebody who owns the land and they lord over it. They're a landlord. So a landlord is anybody who owns a house or a piece of property and they rent it to someone else. And you can only get a dwelling for that. You cannot get a homeowners for that because the homeowner says owner occupied. The only way a landlord can get a homeowners is if the landlord lives there. The landlord would have to live there. All the homeowners policy require that the homeowner live in at least one side. Like it has to be owner occupied. That's what that means with homeowners. That's what owner occupied is that the homeowner lives in at least one of the units. In a dwelling policy, that's not a requirement. They don't care who lives in any of the units. They can be all rentals. Okay. All right. Now back to the coverages. A dwelling policy is in coverage A are both called dwelling because the main point of them is the walls and the roof, which is what a landlord cares about. A landlord is only basically concerned with the walls and the roof because that's what he owns. He doesn't own the furniture inside, the tenants do. Okay. So coverage A is known as dwelling. So we're going to draw a picture of, oh no, I need to change my color. We're going to draw a picture of a house and we're going to use this color. I think it's the white one. We're going to use this color to draw what that is on the house. So this is a house. We got the walls and the roof. And we're going to write that out, walls and roof. And that is coverage A. And that is true for both dwelling and homeowners. The other thing that a dwelling and coverage A dwelling also covers is any materials and supplies. Any materials or supplies next to the house that will become part of the house. Any materials or supplies next to the house that will become part of the house are included in coverage A. So like if I have a pallet of roof tiles delivered to the house to be put on to the roof over the weekend and something happens to it, it's stolen or it's lit on fire, depending on which policy I have, it could cover that. It could pay me for that so that I could get a new set of roof tiles. Okay. So that is coverage A. Coverage A is going to pay for the walls and the roof. And then it's also going to pay for the materials and supplies that are next to the house. Additionally, coverage A will also cover the lawnmower. And we don't just mean lawnmower. It's anything used to service the property. But an example of that is a lawnmower. You use the lawnmower to service the property. So they count that as coverage A dwelling. And I have seen some examples where they also include outdoor property. That coverage A potentially can cover outdoor property, but I have not seen that nearly as much as I have seen more like a lawnmower and materials and supplies. Like if they're going to build a deck and they deliver all this wood to the house and the wood burns up in a fire because usually lightning is covered on every policy. Lightning is always covered. Fire and lightning are always covered on every policy. But lightning strikes, if this materials and supplies right here, if this materials and supplies was a brick, a stack of wood and lightning strikes it and it burns up, that would be covered. You can make a claim for that. Okay, so that is coverage A dwelling. It's the walls and the roof, materials and supplies next to the house that are going to become part of the house. And then anything used to service the property, such as a lawnmower, are all under coverage A. Now, what do I mean when I say coverage A? When you buy a policy, they have to tell you what's what, and they have to determine, how much money are they going to need to take care of certain things. So it's easier to group certain things together as one thing and say, this is how much money we're going to need to rebuild the walls and the roof. And that's why they break the coverages up. So they break it apart into different coverages. Coverage A talks all about how it's going to cover the walls and the roof. Now, coverage A is also known as like the main coverage of the policy, and every other coverage becomes usually a percentage of coverage A. And also is, A looks like walls and roof, right? So that's kind of cool. So every other coverage though becomes a percentage of coverage A, because statistically, as long as insurance companies know the value of A, they get enough for everything else. So when you buy a dwelling or a homeowner's policy, or when you're selling one, you're going to be asking the customer questions. You're going to say, what kind of, or how many bedrooms do you have? How many bathrooms do you have? What are your countertops made out of? What is your flooring made out of? What is your roof made out of? You're going to be asking them questions about the features of the home. And those answers are going to go into a machine, like an algorithm, a calculator system online in your portal. You're going to have some sort of, customer portal system where you plug this information into, and I did like drop down lists. It was very simple. And then it calculates for you a value. And the value is what the insurance company has calculated they will need to rebuild the walls and the roof. And that's what coverage A is, a dollar amount of money that is available if any of the covered perils trigger the policy. This is the coverage that will pay out for the walls and the roof and the materials and supplies next to the house and the lawnmower. We calculated enough money for all of that, and here's how much we would need. And that's coverage A, known as dwelling. So it's named dwelling. Coverage A is named dwelling, and that could be a question. What is what coverage A, or what is the name of coverage A, or what covers dwelling, coverage A. So you need to memorize that. And then you need to know what it responds to, because they could ask a question like, you had this and this happen, the materials and supplies, the lawnmower, and the walls and the roof, something happened. How much coverage do you have for that? And then you need to know other coverages. Like, for instance, technically trees are also covered under coverage A. Now, trees are not part of the definition of A. The definition of A is walls and roof, materials and supplies, and lawnmower coverage. Trees become what is known as additional coverages. So we're going to make a little note over here about additional coverages. Additional coverages are coverages that are built in, automatic, already included, part of the policy. You can't take it off or remove it. One of them is called lawn, trees, shrubs, and plants. Lawn, tree, shrub, and plants. And this is what will pay you money for the fact that you had a tree that was destroyed by lightning, and they will replace the value of that tree. You had shrubs and plants, like plants cost money. People pay money to put plants in their yard, to put trees in their yard. So if these things are destroyed by fire or lightning, talk to your people. Do you know if your tree is covered? Do you know how much money your policy is going to give you if your tree falls? Because we can only give you so much. Let me make sure you're educated on that. Customers will buy from the people who tell them what they're covered for. When they understand the value of insurance, they buy it. They understand the value of it when they know what is happening. So let's talk about your trees. I see that your yard is very beautiful. How much money have you spent on all these bushes? Because when they burn up, do you have enough money? Let's talk about your policy. Let's get you prepared for, what kind of coverages you have, right? Talk to people about what matters to them. That's what helps us to lock in the coverage for them with your insurance. Homeowners, they could be quoting all day, find premiums all day long. what they're buying is you as an agent. So like, explain to them, teach them what it is that they're getting on their policy, and talk to them about their trees. And if they know what will happen if their tree fall. My friend borrowed my car and lightning struck a tree right above it, and the tree, boom, right on my car. And she's like, holy fuck, is this gonna be like, what is gonna happen? Do I have to pay for this? Like, oh my gosh, like these things happen. My friend's tree fell on the car, and then it's like, well, who pays the apartment? Does our insurance pay? Does she owe money? Like, is this covered? Is this not covered? Like, these are the questions that pop up. And it was so fun. She went through all of that right before she became an insurance agent. And she absolutely loves her job. It's like one of her most favorite things ever. She's so thankful that she finally, I was harassing her for years to get her insurance license. At the same time, I was harassing myself to get a business. So I got the insurance exam queen business. So I guess we have a perfect timeline, but those things happen. So talk to your people about it. Like, the purpose of this story is like, when you communicate with people about their policy and the things that can happen and how you can ensure that they are protected, so that if those crazy things happen, instead of those crazy commercials, like, you explain to them how their policy covers those things, and how you will make sure that they will have a place to stay if their house burns down, and how the policy provides for this much coverage in trees, like, talk to them about the things that matter. Anyway, tangent. Okay. Coverage A also covers lawn, trees, shrubs, and plants. And the thing with this though, is that you're going to get 500 per tree, 500 per tree, and up to 5% of A, 5% of A. So $500 per tree, up to 5% of A. What the heck is 5% of A? When I was saying with the dwelling, when you as an insurance agent are asking your insured about the features of their home, what kind of roof, what kind of countertop, what kind of flooring, when you're asking them about those things, you're plugging it into a calculator system that'll spit out a number. So it'll be like, this is our chart of like understanding the coverages and the names. Let's use this as an example of what a policy would look like. So let's say this is the deck page of a policy, and the declaration page is like the summary page, the page that lists out the name of the company, the name of the insured, the amount of coverage, the address of the house, and the premium and the period. A deck page would show you, it would just go like this. It would say, so the deck page, it would say coverage A. And it'll be like $250,000. $250,000. That's what it says on the page. So when your customer gets their policy, that's the first thing they see. Declaration page. There's my name. There's the name of the insurance company. And it says coverage A, $250,000. And I'm paying $1,000 every month, every year for that. That's what they see. Because it'll say coverage A, $250,000, like, show some space. Sorry, let's move this over. This is awesome. I love this new chart idea here. So on the declaration page, it'll say 250,000. And then it'll have the premium for that. And it'll be like 1,000 for the year, because homeowners is generally a year long. Okay. So it'll say coverage A, 250,000, premium $1,000 a year. That's what they're going to see on their declaration page. And this number right here, we're using a nice, well-rounded number. And additionally, we're using the number you need to remember for flood insurance. The max you can get for flood insurance is 250,000. So you want to put that number into your head. So I like to use numbers that you need to know. Okay. So coverage A is going to show 250,000 premium, $1,000 a year. That's all it says. Your customer will not know what that means unless you explain that to them. Coverage A covers the walls and the roof of your house so that if they burn down, we will rebuild your structure to the same like, kind, and quality that it was before, at replacement. So it's going to be brand new stuff. But it's going to be, you know, like you had before. If you had, you know, a super, you know, like with a condo policy, for instance, you literally tell them the features of the home. So like if you have fancy features, the policy will cover the fancy features. It will have the money built in for that, for the upgrades of the house. So that's why they determine coverage A, is by asking about all the features of their home, so that if it does burn down, they will rebuild it to the same level of features, the same amounts, the same things. And then you're paying, you know, your premium for that. So that's coverage A dwelling. It's based on all the features of the home. And your declaration page will look like this to the customers. So you need to understand what all those things are. So anyway, going back to over here to finish out to go with the next coverage. So coverage A, walls and the roof, dwelling. Then your next coverage is coverage B. B. And B is other structure, other structures, other structures. Other structures. What I like to think of with B is that it is the building in the backyard. Coverage B is building in the backyard. Coverage B is the buildings in the backyard. Okay. So coverage B, other structures, buildings in the backyard. Coverage B, buildings in the backyard. And it's the shed, the gazebo, it's the detached garage. It could even be like the fence, the gates. It's anything that's not attached. So another common one, we're going to add it here just because it's so common to see it, is a detached garage. Detached, T-T-A. I don't spell very well, so just forgive me on that one. But detached garage, as long as there's a separation between the walls and the roof and the garage, like they're separated, they're not touching, they consider it detached. And that becomes important because if you do have a garage that is attached, like if you have a garage here, this would be this is like a built-in garage. It's an attached garage. That would be coverage A if the garage is built in. But if the garage is detached and separated, it's known as B, other structures. And a detached garage and a shed are all examples of B, other structures. And then on your declaration page, we'll go back to keeping it in the same color. We'll fix that. Oh, no, you're yellow. B. So on the declaration page to the customer, all it's going to show up as is $25,000. And then it'll have like a premium charge per year. Something like that. Now, how did I get 25? Well, coverage B comes standard at 10% of coverage A. 10%. Oops, did my percent weird. 10% of A. So coverage B, the value of B, the money that the insurance says we will provide for coverage B, they determine that by looking at what is 10% of A. So if A is 250,000, 10% is taking the decimal and moving it over 1, and then that number becomes the 10%. So coverage B would be 25,000. So they're basically saying that the walls and the roof of the house are going to get 250,000 using our example here. And then the shed and the detached garage all together will get 25,000, which is 10% of coverage A. Okay, so you can even add that over here. I like to use green to like indicate money. So you can put a 10% there, 10% there, and it's 10% for both. So on the dwelling and the homeowners, it's 10%. And the reason I'm stressing that it's the same is because we will learn here in a minute that the coverages begin to not be the same soon. So we got to make sure we know what is the same and what is not the same, because they can ask questions that will, go into you are covered by a DP2 and, the tree falls and the fire burns and this, what will happen? And there's a difference between dwelling and homeowners. So we've got to be, awares of what is the same and what is different. What is the same is that so far coverage A, dwelling and homeowners, is called dwelling. It is the main coverage. It is based on the features of the home, the size of the home, and they take all of those features, plug them into a calculator, spits out a value like 250,000. And that is what they're saying that will be available to you if your house burns down. So saying this is the maximum amount of money that we will have available to you to rebuild your house. Do you feel comfortable with this number? Make sure that they understand that that's the number, because there actually is a few different coverages that you're probably going to need to endorse on their policy. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but it's going to help you as a sales agent. Coverage A, let's remind ourselves, coverage A is the maximum amount of money that the insurance will pay out to you to rebuild your house, or to a contractor, whatever, pay for the house rebuild. Okay. That number is based on the calculator algorithm system that the insurance company has based on current market prices, what they can buy the wood for right now, which is why some people may have seen a premium increase recent, because we are running slim on construction materials because people went crazy during the pandemic and remodeled and rebuilt and did all kinds of stuff. And now and everyone's buying new houses. So there's this strain on construction material happening right now. So prices are skyrocketing. Insurance policies can't calculate for stuff like that. They have a little bit of wiggle room, but they can't just, over boost your policy. And they can though, like if you want to pay for that. So the customer literally has the option to be prepared for times like this. And the insurance company offers that. So they say, look, there's a coverage that you can buy, and it's taught in some states, not in others. So what I'm about to say right now is not necessarily for the exam, though it certainly can be a question on your state. It's just not a heavily huge topic and not in all states. But anyway, there is a coverage, an endorsement that is offered on the policy. So remember, an endorsement is adding extra coverage onto your policy. There is an endorsement that you can buy that says inflation guard protection, or increased cost of instruction in construction. So it's either inflation guard protection or increased cost of instruction. And they mean the same thing. Ultimately is that the amount of money that they calculated for coverage A was adequate at that time when a pallet of wood was bought and sold. Market value all the time is like $100. Like market value is what a willing buyer would pay a willing seller. And you could buy a pallet of wood for a decent price, but now that everyone's buying it and shipment issues and COVID stuff and all these things are happening, a pallet of wood is now 4 times the price, 5 times the price, impossible to get. Your insurance company, again, is coverage A. If something happens, if your house burned down and the price of construction materials has gone up, you're not going to have enough money on coverage A to equate for that. So if you would like to make sure that there is more money available, you can buy this endorsement, which is going to allow you the extra money you will need to make up for the fact that the market value of construction materials is really high in demand and very overpriced from what the norm is. So you can sell that to them and make sure that they understand the value of what it is that they are getting. And when you think of sell, like, you're protecting them. You are literally protecting them. Don't think of this as I'm selling something. This is, if they have their house burned down in the middle of the pandemic when wood costs so much money, and I know that I made sure they had this inflation guard protection so that they're not, you know, debating about how they're going to be able to make this happen with these repairs. Insurance is limited. It's not, you know, and you got to make sure that you add what you can, maximize what's available, take advantage of all the additional things that insurance companies offer, because these are things that happen. They wouldn't offer the protection if these things didn't happen. So they can provide extra coverage, and you get to pick what you pay for. So sure, coverage A will have the typical normal amount of construction estimates based on current market prices. And, you know, but if you want to make sure that if the market goes crazy and it's really difficult to buy wood, and or at the same time, another example is, what if the whole neighborhood goes down in a fire? The whole neighborhood is burnt up. Every single person in that neighborhood is going to be needing a contractor. Do you know how hard it is to get a contractor? Maybe you do, because that's what also is happening as of recent. It is really hard for people to find qualified, licensed, bonded, and insured contractors who can make the construction of the home happen in a reasonable time for a decent rate. And when everyone is hiring them, their prices go up because of supply and demand. So they can raise their prices because everybody is trying to buy them at that same time. So if you want your insurance company has to pay for that. So sometimes people may argue with you, that's too much money. I could rebuild a house for less. Be like, okay, but have you also considered, you know, like insurance companies have to pay for contractors. They have to be able to get a contractor and to be able to, you know, rebuild your house. And all of that becomes the value of A. So if they ever argue with you that A is too much, remind them what goes into A, how much A is covering. It's not just the walls and the roof. It's also hiring the contractor who's going to build the walls and the roof. It's also the materials and supplies next to the house. It's also the lawnmower that's used to service the property. And it's also your trees, right? If they have trees, make sure you talk about trees so they know what is covered on their policy. Okay, so back to other structures. I don't know where we went off on our tangent, but I know I wanted to talk about inflation protection, making sure there's enough money. Coverage A is restricted at that certain value, and B is automatically 10% of whatever that value is. Okay. Next up is your stuff. So earlier I just kept saying stuff. Your stuff is personal property, and that is coverage C. So coverage C on both dwelling and homeowners is known as contents and or personal property. It is called contents, like that's the name. But when they talk about it, they always talk about it as personal property. So I just write that too. You're going to erase? Okay. Oh, and I saw a question in the chat. Let me make sure I grab that. I love this. Oh, awesome. Thank you. All right. Coverage C is contents, personal property, contents, personal property. Okay. Now, like we talked about with the dwelling policy, is that the landlord mostly cares about the walls and the roof, and he doesn't cover the stuff inside. He may have some stuff though, like it is very common for a landlord to have maybe a shed or a garage that does have some stuff on the property. And he may need to have some contents coverage on there. And additionally, it's not actually an automatic 50% of A. In fact, it's not activated, it's not turned on as a coverage unless the person says they need it. So on a contents, coverage C is kind like, imagine it's kind of like grayed out. Like it is a dwelling policy allows you to add it easily. And that's why they like leave it as like a placeholder. So like on the deck page, did we update our deck page? On our deck page, the customer, now we're going to actually have a difference. There's going to be a difference here between a homeowners and a dwelling. And the difference is that when they get over here to coverage C, it's going to show nothing for both the, like over here, you would have coverage B, coverage A, you would have your 250,000 and your 1K premium. B, oh, I messed up there. Sorry. I'm rushing making the chart because I don't want to take up too much time, but maybe that's just me overthinking. 250,000. That would be the amount, just like here, right? Coverage A, 250,000, premium, 100,000. So dwelling versus homeowners. Declaration page, coverage B, 25,000. Coverage C would have nothing. And then it would go on to coverage D. Oh, I put D up there. Coverage D. Okay. So it would be nothing. And in fact, you can activate it though, right? Like you can definitely just say, actually, I do. So that you would ask them when you're selling this to a landlord, who you would say, do you have any personal property at the rental location? And he would say yes or no. If he says yes, you're going to ask him how much. And you say, do you have $10,000 worth of property? You know, how much do you have? And then you would just say, okay, he needs 5,000. That's it. So it's not going to be an automatic percent. Like B is always, 10%. Coverage C is just whatever they select. And then you'll know you have it if there's a premium charge for it. That's the answer that you can, that's the answer you want to pick. If you were to see that question, how do you know? And sometimes it's not even a question. Sometimes it's more of, you need to know that to be able to answer the question, or to be able to know the answer. So it's like coverage C is whatever they select. It's not an automatic 50% of A. And that also, oh, I lost it. Coverage C is 5,000. Oh, you have it. You have it if there's a premium charge for it. You have it if there's a premium charge for it. I wanted to write that down, but my computer is not letting me move it. Oh, there we go. Oh, it likes 2 fingers. I forget. Sorry. Okay. Oh, yes. So there was a miscommunication in the Calendly versus the Zoom integration or something. And then, but on Facebook, it was always listed as 6 to 8. So I do apologize, but the recording will be sent out as quickly as I can, but I do apologize that there was a discrepancy between what was happening due to the technology fluffle. But yeah, just sorry. Let me go back to teaching, but I do apologize very much. Okay. So coverage C, you have it if there's a premium charge for it. Oh yeah, no, yeah, no. You have it if there is a premium charge for it. So coverage C is, you have it if you have a premium charge for it. And if there is no premium then there is no coverage C on a dwelling. You have to choose it. So on a homeowners though, it's just going to show up as 50% of, have we picked a color yet? Yeah, we did blue. I'm on blue, I think. Okay. So then on a homeowner's declaration page, which is what goes to the customer, remember, they don't get to see what you know about the policies. They don't know that A is the walls and the roof. They don't know that B is the buildings in the backyard. They don't know that coverage C is personal property. Like you got to like really explain that to them. It may have the name actually. We should add that in there. It's going to have the name of it. So we'll fix that with the chart, but it'll be in there. Contents. So it'll have the name and it will have the amount of money, but that is it. And over here, it is 50% of coverage A. So it's automatically 50% of A. 50% of A. And see how I actually kept coverage A. I said how I like to use green as money. Money is, like money is the main thing we're getting here too. And that's coverage A is the main thing. And everything is like based off of A. So it's like the main monies of the account that's available. And that's why we do it in green. Oh, I just got to call. Yes, I'm so sorry about the timing mishap. But hopefully we make up for that and you'll have your recording. And I'm sorry. And I love you all. All right. So coverage C is 50% of A, which, I need to do the math. I don't know the math on that. I'm not I've come to learn some like very common math that I use, like understanding percents better, but I am not a math very comfortable in a math. So that one I would have to think for a second. It's 25, 125. Yeah, it'd be 125, right? 250,000 divided by 2 equal 125. Oh my God, I did it. 125. Okay. Yeah. I definitely been working on like feeling a lot more comfortable with math, and look at me actually doing it. 125. 125,000. And then it'll have, its little premium charge. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a number that like, we're just going to go with 500 a year, and that's half of that. And that at least tells us 50%. So maybe we should make B. Yeah, let's do that. Let's make B 10 a year. That'll help us. That's cool. Okay. So that is coverage C. And this is, again, all your stuff. So like we said, the clothes, the shoes, the furniture, the pots, the pans, all the things that if you were to take the house and empty it, dump it outside, that is coverage C. My stuff, my clothes, my shoes, my furniture. So in our little diagram over here, our little charty chart, we want to add personal property. So this is stuff. Oops, wrong color. Tomorrow's class, if you signed up for it, is 6 to 8 Eastern. 6 to 8 Eastern. All the classes that are scheduled out that are available are 6 to 8 Eastern. And I'm so sorry again for the mishap. Stuff, clothes, furniture. It's all your stuff. It's all stuff. Now, there are actually a couple of exceptions to the rule with stuff. So we might as well add that in, and our chart might get a little bit crowded because I just could shrink the garage. Actually, let me do that. My middle school students would be very upset when I would change the chart because they would yell that they already drew it to scale. So I'm sorry if you're feeling that right now. Okay. But it was so sweet was, so my boyfriend, found me on YouTube studying for his exam and he gave me his chart and how he drew it. And that was so sweet. Anyway. All right. So all your stuff, what is not covered or limitations. Okay. So coverage C, personal property has some limitations and you want to remember there's a few of them. So as you're like reading through the material and you're learning this material, there are a few times where there'll be a section with bullet point, number, blah. What do I need to know? When you're reading this section, it's going to be called like personal property special limits, like limits of personal property, coverage C limitations, something like that. And it's going to list out a bunch of numbers and a bunch of categories. And what they're doing there is they're trying to say that coverage C cannot be like unlimited, that there needs to be a set amount of money, not just on your stuff. Like the amount is 50% of A. So whatever they have for coverage A, the insurance company is going to pay out 50% of whatever A is. Like that's what they're going to pay out. If everything that they owned burned in a fire, the insurance company will pay out 50% of A. So in our example, it would be 125,000. That's what would pay out for coverage A or coverage C. For them to rebuy their shoes, rebuy their clothes, rebuy their furniture, rebuy their shampoo, rebuy their pots and pans, their silverware, their jewelry, their guns, their everything, cash. If you have cash, that's the money we use. Now, that's what coverage C covers is all of your stuff, your coins even. Now, the insurance company, they can't cover though. There are certain categories, things that maybe are stolen more often or just too valuable to just willingly cover at 50% of A. Because when we think of coverage C, this is a great time to talk about blanket coverage because coverage C is blanket coverage. There are policies that are blanket and there are coverages that are blanket as well. So let's understand the concept of blanket, okay? Coverage C contents. Coverage C contents. Coverage C contents. That's what we have for coverage C. This is my clothes, my shoes, my furniture, my jewelry, my guns, my silverware, my cash, my shampoo, my, I don't know, anything, everything, makeup. It's all your stuff, everything, dishes, pots, pans, towels. I mean, everything, paintings, anything out, computers, cameras. It's everything, everything. Do we do coins? Coins. Okay. All of this is covered as a blanket for one amount of money. All of this goes under a blanket for one amount of money, which is 50% of A. And that would be like, oh, in our example, we're using one example, 125,000. That's our example number. Okay. That's 50% of what coverage A is. Okay. Now, the insurance company and jewelry includes watches. Yes, it does. That question was in the inbox. So the insurance company, there are certain categories, certain things where they don't want to be like, okay, all of your guns were stolen. you can get 125 right now, if that's the only thing that happened. Like coverage C covers all of your stuff for whatever perils are listed, and theft is covered on a homeowner's. So if a person walks in to your house and steals all of your guns, and let's say it's a hunter, there's lots of guns, lots of valuable bullet ammunition, all the stuff, guns, all the things, and those are all stolen, they could claim up to 125,000 as a blanket policy. And the insurance is like, oh, heck no, not guns, no, we cannot do that. They limit the theft of guns. They limit the theft of guns to 2,500. So if no matter how whether you have $5,000 of guns or $100,000 of guns, if they are stolen, the most the insurance will pay is $2,500. That's it. No matter how many guns you have. Now, if your guns were to burn up in a fire, if your guns were to just burn, they could be claimed for the full 250,000. They don't have a problem with that, because guess what? If your guns burned up in a fire, that means so did everything else. And you're only going to claim up to 125. So they only really care to limit the theft of guns. There are two other things that they limit theft for, and that is jewelry is limited to 1,500 for the theft. The theft of jewelry is 1,500. And then you want to know cash. You want to know it's limited to 200. So what that's saying is you could you could go to your insurance company and you could say, like, yeah, I had $1 million of $100 bills buried in my mattress that I've been saving, and I want that insured up to it. Again, you're only going to be limited to 125 for sure, but they're also going to limit you to 200, because if a fire, if it was somehow only your bed caught fire, or just like it'd be way too simple to burn cash and claim it all with the insurance company, right? So they're like, we're going to limit a very easy way for people to file claims by limiting cash to $200. Because if fire is always covered, somebody could say, well, I had $100,000, but it accidentally burned up in a fire. Can you repay me that money? Because we would do that with your clothes and your shoes and your dishes. If they burned up in a fire, we would replace the value of them, the actual cash value. By the way, one thing to think about with coverage A to put into our minds is this is going to be at an actual cash value basis, meaning goodwill value. So that's another thing to talk about with your customers, is that with actual cash value is the goodwill value. That's the used value. When they say 125,000, that's for the used value of your items. So when you tell this to your customers, make sure they understand that, because there is an endorsement that you could buy on coverage C contents. There's an endorsement, and remember, an endorsement is additional coverage that you can add on, or an endorsement is a written change, a printed addendum. Many endorsements are, you can add coverage to your policy. So you're adding on extra cover via a printed addendum and an endorsement. So some endorsements cost money, some don't. But when you're adding a coverage, they're definitely going to raise your premium. So always keep in mind that endorsements that add coverage will raise the premium. Endorsements that are adding coverage will raise the premium. So you can add an endorsement for two things. One, you can add an endorsement to get replacement cost. And instead of actual cash value, and that's going to give you the brand new value. And how they will determine that is they will bump coverage C from 50%. They will bump coverage C from 50% to 70%. Okay. So with an endorsement, remember your coverage C contents, all your stuff, your clothes, your shoes, your furniture, your pots, your pans, all of your stuff is covered up to 50% of A on a homeowners. In our example, that would be 125,000. You're going to get the goodwill value for all your items. And then, because if it is a smaller claim, like again, if it's a full blown fire, maybe 125,000 is enough to get replacement. But if you had like, you know, your furniture burnt, just a living room issue, and like, it's not like you're rebuying everything. Keep in mind, they're going to give you the used value of your couch. So you're not going to get as much money as you might expect, and you're going to pay the deductible. So be prepared for that. You're either going to have to buy less of it, or you're going to have to boost in a little bit cash to get the same value that you want. I could add this little endorsement here for you, which only increases your policy by $5 a month, so that if all your stuff did burn up in a fire, I can give you a much fatter check after. Right? That's what we're talking about, what these coverages, let them know what is available on their policy and what they could buy that will maximize and boost their policy. Who wouldn't want the brand new value? Like, do you want the goodwill? Well, I mean, I love goodwill, but if you want to save premium, or if you want the bigger check after the claim, you've got to have replacement cost. And you can buy it. You can buy that on their policy. You can just add it by adding this endorsement, and it will give you the brand new value of everything, and it will bump. But when you do that, when you add that endorsement, not only will it switch the policy from, not only will the printed addendum say we're going from replacement, or we're going from actual cash value to replacement, the addendum will also say coverage C is now 70% of A, which means they would have to go back to your deck page if you were to add this endorsement. So if this endorsement was added over here to the deck, then the policy would actually be 70% of 250,000. So that would be times 0.70 equal 175. So they would get $50,000 more for a replacement cost. And that's something that you can tell your people. You could be like, look, if your house, we estimate that replacement cost on your home would be 70% of coverage A. If all of your stuff burned into a fire, we're only going to give you 50% of your stuff, the goodwill value of your stuff. If you would like to make sure that you have more money available to rebuy everything that you own in your home after you lose everything in a fire, we can add this endorsement called whatever replacement cost, and you will get the brand new value of your items, and it's only going to be $5 a month or whatever it is. It's usually not that bad. It's really not. Okay. Yes. If you have contents in the shed, is that covered under B or C? Not B. B is buildings in the backyard, the detached garage, the fence, the gazebo. A, though, is anything that is used to service the property. So usually in the shed, you're going to have like lawnmower, building supplies, building materials, and, you know, yard stuff. So if it's that kind of stuff, that can be covered under coverage A over here, materials and supplies, and then anything used to service the property. When we say lawnmower over here, we also include anything used to service the property. Service the property. Anything used to service the property, like a lawnmower. So if the shed has a bunch of that stuff in it, that could be covered under A. B is just the walls and the roof of the shed and the detached garage. But if you have other stuff in the shed, like if it's used for storage and you've got like winter clothes out there, then that would be C. And it really doesn't change anything for the customer necessarily. Like if you had just your shed burned down with like your Christmas stuff, what's going to happen is you're going to pay one deductible, you know, $500 or $1,000. And the insurance company is going to go, okay, here's your little piggy bank for coverage B. And we, you know, grab some money out of that to rebuild the shed. And here's your little piggy bank for coverage C. And we grab money out of that and we rebuild your shed and we replace your Christmas stuff. We write you a check for your Christmas stuff. It doesn't really impact you if they're using like B or C, because you're paying one deductible for one claim anyway. I feel like that was a little bit of a tangent, but it depends on whatever's on the shed. So a question said, are the contents in the shed covered under B or C? I would say C and sometimes A. If the stuff in the shed is used to service the property, A would cover it. If the shed is personal property, Christmas, extra storage, whatever, winter clothes, then it would be C. Okay. All right. So coverage C, personal property. Ooh, we got to plug that in. All right, 1 second. Let me get the laptop plugged in. Oh, and we've been going for a while. I'm okay to keep going, no problem. But we can take like a little bathroom break if you guys want to do that. But I'm not nearly done yet. So I'm going to keep going till I get it done, and you guys will have the recording. But this is awesome because this is going over so much more in-depth stuff than we have available on the YouTube and any of the recorded classes right now. So this is awesome. And I'm loving it. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, plug in my laptop, get a drink of water or go to the bathroom. That's what I'm going to do. And yeah, let me pause that. Okay, so in summary, we have so far to summarize what we have talked about thus far as we move on to the next coverage. You have a dwelling in a homeowner's policies. What is similar about them, they're up to 4 separate units. You can have an incidental service-based business where you're not selling retail and there's no more than 2 people working at any one time. There is no farm and there is no land coverage on a dwelling in a homeowner's. And the main big difference between a dwelling and a homeowner's is that homeowner says that you need to be owner occupied. The person who owns the policy needs to live at the house. And also that that you own the structure itself. Gets a little weird with an HO4, which is renters only, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Dwelling policies is typically a landlord policy because there's no requirement that they live there, that you can rent out the property to other people and the insurance company is fine with it. So that's why landlords get dwelling policies. You don't have to be a landlord to get a dwelling. You may just want a lower version of a policy because a dwelling is slightly less than a homeowner's. And it's also a little bit cheaper. And you, with a DP1, you actually get a lot of options of picking and choosing what you want. And being bare bones minimum at the same time is kind of interesting. So if somebody wants that and not homeowners, they may choose a dwelling, but it's just that, so it's not required to be a landlord is my point there. It's not required to be a landlord. It's just that landlords are the ones who generally buy them because they're mainly focused on the exterior, the walls and the roof of the property, not the stuff on the inside. So as we were learning about the coverages between dwelling and homeowners, we have learned that coverage A is known as dwelling. It provides coverage for the walls. When I say it provides coverage for one, it does provide coverage because coverage A, when you get into the insuring agreement, it'll say coverage A pays for rebuilding the walls and the roof. These coverages are what pays for fixing the dwelling. And the dwelling is the walls and the roof, any materials or supplies next to the house that will become a part of the house. And then anything used to service the property like a lawnmower. That is coverage A, which is known as the main coverage. Every other coverage becomes based off of it. So like, for instance, coverage B, other structures, is any buildings in the backyard, like a shed or a gazebo or a detached garage, or the gates, the fences. That comes at 10% of coverage A, and A is determined based on the features of the home. So whatever kind of countertops and flooring and paint, whatever it is that you have, will determine how much money is available for A. And then all the other coverages become a percent of that. B, other structures, the buildings in the backyard, are 10% of coverage A. And the key thing with other structures is it's detached. It's separated from A, the main walls and the roof of the house. Then we've got contents, and contents, coverage C is known as contents, personal property. This is all your stuff, your clothes, your shoes, your furniture, your guns, your jewelry. It's all of your stuff that you own inside of your house. And that is 50% of whatever coverage A is. And in our example, 250,000 would be 125,000. And that comes at the actual cash value, the used value of your items. And you can bump that up by buying an endorsement that raises coverage C from actual cash value, the goodwill, the used value, to current price, best buy price, like the brand new value of it. But it would also require, if you did buy that endorsement, it would require that you boost your 50% of C to 70%, so that it's automatically 70% of A, so that there is more money available to give you that replacement price dollar amount. Then the next coverage on a homeowners is going to be coverage D, and a dwelling. This is where we get really different. Oh, and also, as a reminder, with dwelling and contents coverage, it's not 50% of A automatically on a dwelling. You only have it if you are paying for it. So there, you only have it if you know, there's a premium charge for it. I know we wrote it somewhere. Oh, right here. So when you get your insurance policy, it looks like this on the declaration page, a little bit more fancy like over here, but I was quickly scribbling it here. You know you have it if you have a premium charge for it. So coverage C is not automatic on a dwelling, because remember, it's purchased by a landlord, and a landlord doesn't typically have contents at the property. Maybe a little bit, like, you know, stuff in the shed. Like, my friend is renting out a house where the landlord still has the garage, and he's got all of he uses the garage as a storage unit for his property. So he does leave $5,000 of, coverage for that storage unit. So you just pick the amount you want on a dwelling, whereas on a homeowners, it comes standard at 50% of coverage A. Okay, so then the next coverage that we have is different, and it's different in two ways, actually, which is kind of cool, because this helps with our memory retention. How is the homeowners and dwelling policy different? Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. You guys haven't seen my screen. Remember I turned it off? You guys got to remind me. Okay, give it a second. It should be clicking on. Did you guys remind me? No, sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay. But I'm still not sharing now. Oh, it's the wrong screen. That's why. Okay. Can you guys share my screen? No, right? Too many computers. Do you guys see it? Or am I crazy? Are you guys still here? Yes. Okay. Did you see it the whole time? No. Okay. All right. So I'm not insane. Okay. All right. Now you see it. Okay, yes. So I mean, I was doing a summary, so it's not like there was too much there. I did fill in a little bit, not really. But I was referring to the screen the whole time, so I do apologize. If that happens again, like where if I'm looking down a lot, technology, man, like, sometimes you forget to hit that little share screen button or you just assume. So my apologies for that. But thank you. That we got the reminder from somewhere that it wasn't happening. Okay. So, yeah, talking about the difference between a dwelling and a homeowner's, all that good stuff. And then we were on to coverage D. D is where it is different, and there are two reasons why it is different. And we need to get a new color here. So D on a dwelling is known as fair rental value. Fair rental value. Fair rental value. Now think about for a minute, a landlord rents his house and he makes money off of people paying him rent to have this house. And part of, if a fire burns the house down, his tenants will not be living there anymore. This is the coverage that will pay him his missed rent on the structure while it is being rebuilt. And you get to explain that to your customers. This is the coverage that will pay you your missed rent. Did you know that you will get your missed rent? That if you do invest in this property and you're quoting around to see if you're interested in buying this, if you're interested in getting this property and you want to know if you're going to be able to make your money back to pay your rent, if you're overextended on your mortgage and you really, really need that rent money and you don't have anything left in savings to cover it, if you don't have tenants this month and the house burns down, we will get you fair rental value each month while the repairs are being made on the house. That's what fair rental value is that if this is we're switching gears here. This is a indirect coverage, indirect. The direct loss. Yeah, I don't know. Indirect, yeah. Indirect, direct. All of these losses are direct. And what I mean is they are directly burnt by the fire. And it's any peril. But any peril that happens is happening directly to the walls and the roof, the shed, and the stuff. Missed rent is not like directly happening. It's not like a danger zone. It's not like a fire burning and a fire raging. It's an indirect thing. It's a consequence to the fire, to the dwelling. So one of the consequences of the house burning down is that they're going to miss their rent money because their tenants are not going to live in a burned down house. So the landlord can collect fair rental value from his insurance company, which will make up for the missed rent while they are using coverage A to rebuild the house following the peril of fire. And that is an indirect coverage. Indirect is anything that is not happening in the moment of danger. The moment of danger is the fire, the lightning, the wind, the hail, and anything that happens during that moment is the direct loss. After you put out the fire and you catch your breath and you go, okay, what do I need to deal with now? The things you need to deal with now is that your tenants have left and there's no rent money. And that's the indirect loss. Anything outside the danger zone. You're not in danger anymore. The fire has been put out. The fire is direct. The aftermath is the indirect. The danger zone is direct. Okay, what am I dealing with now is the indirect. And fair rental value, missing your check, that's an indirect loss. There's no fire still burning, maybe in your bank account, but not an actual fire. Okay, So coverage D is fair rental value on a dwelling, and that is different from a homeowner's. On a homeowner's policy, oops, wrong color. On a homeowner's policy, D is known as loss of use. Loss of use. Now, D, loss of use, is saying that you cannot use your house. You can't use it. It burned down and now you cannot use it. You cannot use the house. That's what loss of use means, which is covering two things. It's covering two things under loss of use. One, it is covering that fair rental value. It's available anyway. When I say that, it's fair rental value is available under loss of use. The other thing, because like we said, a homeowner's, you can have up to 4 units. So when you, if this is you, so this is I'm going off on a loss of use tangent here. If this is the property, so let's say you're quoting this property for a homeowner's. We have two things that are, and we're talking about coverage D, loss of use. We have two things. We have fair rental value and we have additional living expenses. Okay. So homeowners is going to come with coverage D, loss of use, additional living expenses. Now, as we drew earlier in this, can you guys see that when I do that? I wonder if you guys can see you guys can't see like an arrow. You can only see it when I draw. Okay. Sometimes I'm talking with an arrow, but I don't think y'all see it. Okay. So in this example here, we said that you can have a homeowner's up to 4 individual units, but a homeowner says that you are required to live in it. The homeowner has to live in at least one of the units. And then he is allowed to rent out the other units to a tenant. So I'm going to redraw this so that we can see it more clearly. But if you have a homeowner's policy on a 4-unit property and you're talking to this person, this customer, about this policy and what's going to happen if fire happens, you're going to say, look, you are going to miss out rent money on 3 properties from your tenants. I'm going to spell tenants wrong. Tenants. That looks close enough. Renters. Tenants, renters. Sorry for my misspellings. And then you are going to, now you are going to have to pay for a hotel because you live here. This is the owner. This is the homeowner. He's the guy he has to live in that unit. In order to have a homeowner, someone's got to live here. So the owner lives in this unit. He's renting out the other units. If this thing burns to the ground, if there is the peril of fire, then the tenants are going to leave somewhere else. Bye. There's no place to live for us in a burned down building. You're going to miss their rent money. So the rent money disappears. You can collect that under your homeowners as under loss of use. And it's called fair rental value for that piece. And the homeowner, he's going to go stay at a hotel and he needs to be able to pay for that hotel. and we're going to pay for that hotel under additional living expenses. So these additional living expenses pay for that hotel. Okay. And you get to explain that to them and make sure they know what's available to them and how much the insurance company is protecting them, that God forbid that this happens, because it does happen. If you rent out 3 units in your home and this person doesn't make great decisions about cooking and it burns down the whole thing, you're not only is your income property gone, but your house is gone. Do you have enough protection for that? Let's look at your policy and make sure. Let's max it out so that you can have all the benefits available. What you pay, what a customer pays in premium is minuscule to what can be paid out to them and the benefits that they can receive. Having insurance is like having a savings account with limitations. It's there when you're in an emergency. It just has to be the perils that are covered emergency. Okay. Question in the chat box popped up. I got a question that asked what is not covered under additional coverage. Transportation. So in her question, she says, she has a question. I got a question that asked what is not covered under additional coverage. Now, additional coverage is a different, what we're learning about right now. This is kind of a side tangent. What we're learning about right now is the major coverages, A, B, C, D. You're referring to an additional coverage, which is like lawn, trees, shrubs, plants. It's like a side dish to the main coverages, but we'll talk about when they get there. But transportation, your house is not a car. So that's, well, maybe, do you mean additional living coverage? Yeah, you meant addition. Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure yeah, because there's additional, I was like, wait a minute, you are talking about additional living, but when it said additional coverage, it triggered me to think about additional coverage and not additional living coverage. But then I was like, I knew I answered it right. Sorry. No problem. No problem. Yeah. So that is additional living. So coverage E, that's perfect. So that's a perfect question at this time. My bad. Now that I got, so additional living. Yes, exactly. So her question said, what is not covered by additional living? What is not covered by additional living? And then, so what is covered? What is not covered by additional living is transportation, because your house is not a car. Your house burned down, but your house isn't responsible for your car. What is covered under additional living would be the hotel and food and clothing. So clothing. Think of it, if everything burned in a fire, you're going to need some emergency clothes. So that's why it covers clothing. It's if all the clothes that you owned were burned in the fire, you know, most people don't have a suitcase ready to leave the house when it burns down. So you usually only have the clothes on your back. So additional living is going to give you the hotel, a place to live, food to eat. And because your kitchen got burned up, they imagine that you had, and then also additionally with food, if you don't have a kitchen to cook in, you have to eat out at restaurants. That's going to cost you extra money. And then clothing, if everything you had was probably burned in the fire, you don't have any clothes. So again, these are great benefits to talk about with the customer. I'm so glad we got this question. So not covered transportation. Your home is not your car. If your car did burn down with the house, which is possible, if the car is the thing that caught fire and was burning in the garage and then caught the house on fire and all of it burned down, but all of that would be covered, but the car would be covered under auto and your home would be covered under home. So transportation is not covered under additional living, but hotel, a place to sleep, a place to live, food, you can't cook in your kitchen and you burnt your food, got all burned up. And then clothing, you probably had nothing when you left the house when it was on fire. Okay. Okay, so on homeowners, so the difference with dwelling and homeowners, coverage D is now different. Coverage D has fair rental value and homeowners has loss of use, which includes fair rental value. And as we said, it also includes additional living. Additional living. I don't want to make that green, sorry. Let's go orange. Additional living. And then since we're different in two ways now. E is going to be different on dwelling than it is on homeowners. On a dwelling policy, E is additional living. E just straight up is additional living. So a homeowner's policy will put fair rental and additional as one coverage called loss of use. But on a dwelling policy, they put D and E separate. D is fair rental value. E is additional living. Under homeowners, it's just called loss of use. And it is a combination of fair rental value and additional living. Now on a dwelling policy, this is another place where we're different. On a dwelling policy, coverage D and E will make up one bucket of money. And when I say bucket of money, I mean you get one bucket for both D and E, and you get to take money out of the bucket until it's empty. Like when you think of coverages, when you think of coverage A, it's like a bucket of, 250,000 and the kitchen burns down, they reach in and grab 100,000 to rebuild the kitchen, and you have as much coverage as you have as the bucket is full. As the bucket empties, it empties. So that was that example. But anyway, you get one amount of money between fair rental value and additional living. And on a dwelling policy, you get 20%. You get 20%. Now, it doesn't matter if you only use fair rental value. If you're not living there, if you have a dwelling and you're a landlord and you're not living there and a tenant is living there, you don't need additional living, and that's fine. You can use all of that 20% for fair rental value. If you are living there, then cool, use some of that money for that. You have up to 20%. You can use all of it for fair rental, all of it for additional, or half and half, 70-30, 60-40, 50-50. They don't care how you split it up, but you only get 20% of whatever coverage A is. And then on a dwelling policy, loss of use over here is actually 30% of A. So dwelling gets it a little bit, or homeowners, I'm sorry, homeowners gets it a little bit better because it gets 10% more, it gets 30%. So the two of them together, loss of use is 30% of A, and it makes up fair rental and additional living. Because it's not likely that a homeowners will have a tenant. They're more likely to use just additional living anyway, so they don't make it two separate distinct coverages. As on a dwelling they do. And one of the reasons they do make it a distinct coverage is that, like I said, there's always an exception to something. Everything always has an exception. A DP1 is one of those ones. Remember up here, if we remember this chart, we said DP1 is named peril. DP1 also has another unique thing down here where the additional living must be at, and we're going to put it on the chart somewhere when I'm going to draw DP1s down here. So I'm going to add that to the chart. I'm not going to do it right now because I don't know where I'm going to put it. But coverage D or DP1 doesn't come with additional living except by endorsement. It's the one thing It's the one coverage on a DP1 that you have to endorse is additional living. You get to pick and choose if you want it or not. And if you're a landlord and you're not living there and you want a DP1, which is the cheapest bare bones policy, and I know a lot of cheap bare bone landlords who are contractors and they'll rebuild the building themselves. That's a guy who buys a DP1, a basic Bob. He doesn't need additional living, so they leave it off of the policy on a DP1, and you get to choose to add it if you want it, and you would have to add it via endorsement. Okay, now over here with homeowners, we are now different in another way. On a dwelling over here on this side, with the dwelling over here on our left-hand side of the chart, we talked about indirect versus direct and how coverage A, B, and C are all direct. That it is the fire, the wind, the hail, it's the danger zone, and that D and E is the indirect, the consequences of the fire and the danger zone, the aftermath after the danger. Over here on a homeowner's side of the chart, we're going to do section 1 and section 2, which is we have direct and indirect happening as well, and we can label that. But we're also going to now see that homeowners has 2 sections. That didn't do what I wanted it to do. On a homeowners, and also we got pointed out in the chat box, we need to put 50% of A here. Contents. 50% on homeowners. Perfect. Okay. So on a homeowner's policy, we also have direct and indirect, where coverage you have coverage A, B, and C. These are all indirect or direct. I'm sorry, direct. Sorry. These are all direct. And then coverage D is indirect. It's the hotel, it's the aftermath. But then we also have another separation that we need to have here. Trying to see a color we haven't used. We have another separation happening here. Is switching from this is all this is all known as section 1. Section 1 on a homeowner's policy. Coverages A through D are known as section 1. And section 1 is all about property. Property. Section 1. I'm going to redo this. Section. Oh, and it's not a 1 like a number 1. They're going to draw it like a Roman numeral. Section 1, property. Section 1, property. So this side between coverages A through D is known as section 1, property. Section 1, property. And there's still they're shared between direct and indirect. But section 1 is saying, oh, I don't mean to do that. It's covering property. Property is me and my stuff. Property is me and my stuff. My walls, my roof, my clothes, my shoes. That's section 1. Is my stuff, me and my stuff, my walls, my roof, my house, my clothes, my shoes, my lawnmower, my hotel, my missed rent money. That is section 1 is property. me and my stuff. I'm number one. I'm come first on a property policy. It's me and my stuff. On a homeowners, section 2 is a different thing. Section 2 is known as liability. Oops, didn't give myself enough space. Section 2, liability. So you have 2 separate parts of a homeowner's policy. Section 1, property, me and my stuff. Section 2, liability, you and your stuff. Section 2, remember, liability is I am responsible for hurting you. I am responsible for my dog biting you. I am responsible for my kid punching you. Liable is I am responsible. Liable is I am responsible. Now that gets a little bit weird because with coverage F, we will learn that there's not a fault, but if you are a responsible adult, you will be a good neighbor and pay medical payments, but we'll get to that. Okay, so homeowners coverage A through D are known as section 1 property, covering the walls and the roof, the shed in the backyard, the personal property, and going to stay at a hotel and potential rent money. Coverage, and we can draw that out if we want to. So we have our little chart over here where we've got, you know, walls and a roof is coverage A, it's the white stuff. B is other structures, it's the yellow stuff. Contents coverage C is the blue stuff. And then we've got D, loss of use, fair rental value, and additional living. So we're going to have the house and it burns down. And we have our tenants leave. We have missed rent money. And we have hotel money. Oh, that was supposed to be orange, according to our chart. Okay. So that is section 1 property, okay? Now we are moving into section 2 liability, and liability is you and your stuff. And I am liable to you. I am responsible to you for you and your stuff. That is what liability means. So liability, the first coverage on a homeowner is under section 2. So we're on section 2 liability is coverage E. We just keep going in the alphabet and it's known as liability. And what we want to write over here is our memory trick for this one is at fault, at fault. And we can think enemy, because your enemy is likely to sue you. And if your dog bit your enemy, they're going to sue you for everything. And this is how much coverage you'll get when your enemy tries to sue you for something like that on your homeowners. That's how much coverage you get. That's another thing you can talk about with your customers that you're selling to, providing them protection. If someone sues you, if your kid does something, your dog bites someone, you know, someone gets hurt in your swimming pool, you know, Karen brings her son over, he gets hurt in the swimming pool, she sues you. Do you have protection for that? Your homeowner is going to offer you this. Is that enough? How about an umbrella policy? We can get you well-rounded and protected. We ought to make sure that they understand how their insurance relates to them at a real life level. And coverage E liability is this sue me protection. That's what liability is. If you're going to sue me, this is how much protection I have from my homeowner's insurance. Now, if I am at fault and I am guilty, they will pay out this amount of money. Hopefully, I'm not actually at fault and I'm not guilty. And there is an additional coverage that is added on to this. Oh, you know what? I used pink, I think, before for endorsements. Yeah, I did. Okay. I'm going to use a different color for additional coverages. I think I already used green and orange. There is, sorry, I'm talking to myself. Wouldn't that also be medical payments? Still confuses me. Okay, so we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about that, Lizbelle, because she's like, well, what about F, which is medical payments? So we're going to talk about that. So liability is the sue me. If you sue me, this is how much money I have available to me. And usually an enemy is the one who's going to come after you. E for enemy. That's why we do it. E, liability, sue me. Especially if my doggy, if my doggy bites you, coverage E, liability. The doggy bit me, you owe me my knee, coverage E, liability. That's our memory trick there for that one. But in addition, there is a additional coverage. Additional coverage is not our main coverage. Our main coverages are always A, B, C, D. Auto, home, dwelling, commercial, A, B, C, D, main coverages. Our additional coverages are the ones that just have names. They don't have an A, B, C, or D. And additional coverages are the ones that are built in. Remember, they are built in. They're not costing you extra money. You cannot remove them. They're automatically included. That's additional coverages. You have, in addition to liability, in addition to coverage E. Now, coverage E is going to come at like $100,000 limit. Like it's not, now that we moved into section 2, it's no longer a percentage of A. It's just its own coverage. And liability at a minimum is $100,000, which is why I use at least $3 signs to indicate that it's $100,000 minimum. $3 signs to indicate, you know, 100,000. That's how we abbreviate $100,000. That represents that. When you have $100,000, we abbreviate it as 100K. And then, so that's, to me, I see $3 signs there. And that's why I use it for liability down here, that it's at least $100,000. We abbreviate 100,000 as 100K. I see $3 signs. At a minimum, it's 100,000, but it could be more. It could be 300,000. But again, that's still $3 signs. So we're indicating that it's at least, 100,000 or more than that. It's a pretty decent amount of coverage. Now, in addition to that money, so even if E is only 100,000 or 300,000 or 500,000, which are the typical limits, in addition to that money, you have money for a lawyer. So in addition to coverage E liability, you have money for a lawyer, costs to defend. The insurance company will pay to defend you. The insurance company will pay to defend you. They will pay for your lawyer. And that is an additional coverage that is built in, automatic to coverage E liability. And it's extra money. When we say in addition, we're saying extra money. Extra money. The money for the lawyer is not coming out of the $100,000. This $100,000 is just for the victim of the dog bite, just for the person that you are guilty of hurting. So hopefully, you're not at fault and the lawyer clears you up. But if you are somehow deemed at fault, or you are actually at fault, coverage E is how much money is available to pay out, and the customer gets to pick. They get to pick if you want 100,000 minimum, but you can go 300, you can go 500. The higher it is, the better, because you never know what might happen. Like if you do have a dog, and your dog does attack someone else, like even a child, you know, the dog gets scared. I just saw a thing, a Chihuahua bit like an eyelash off of a lady. Like you could get sued for that, you know, and if you are responsible, it is an animal, that is absolute liability. Absolute liability says you are absolutely responsible for what your animal does. So if someone, you know, your dog, you know, bites somebody, goes after somebody, whatever, you can love your dog as much as you want, stuff happens. You get liability protection for that. You get as ever much money as is available there. So if you think Karen's going to sue you for only 100,000, then we'll put you at the minimum. If you would want to be protected for 500,000, we can do that. You want even more protection, let's get you an umbrella policy. Because people are sue happy, and insurance is sue me protection. And that's what coverage E is, liability. You want to sue me, this is my protection. And the higher that limit is, the safer, the more protected your assets are. Okay, so that's coverage E, liability, and there is an additional coverage, also known as supplementary. We need to throw that word in there. Supplementary. They will usually talk about this one as supplementary. Supplementary, okay? This is a supplementary coverage, additional coverage, supplementary coverage, tomato, tomato, it means the same thing. And when they talk about the money for a lawyer, the cost to defend you, they will typically use the word supplementary for some reason. That's just how it is. So I wanted to throw that in there. Okay. The next coverage that you have on the homeowners under section 2 liability, which says I'm responsible, is, oh, and let's draw our picture for liability. So liability, we coverage E. So far on our chart over here, we have labeled every coverage in the picture. And now we need to draw our doggy. Oh, that should be red. That is red. That's red. Oh, yeah, that's red. Draw our doggy. And doggy bites. Ouch. Okay, doggy bites. It's not just a dog bite. It's could be anything. Like I said, you're on hunting property and a person, you let them come hunt on your property and it's your fault. They sue you that they tripped over something, whatever. The judge decides they're guilty. Coverage E is what is available for that. And also, in addition, you have money for the lawyer. And the money for the lawyer comes out of another bucket of money. The whatever limit you have here, 100,000, 300,000, that's just for the person your dog bit. You have even more money for the lawyer. Okay. And one more thing too with the lawyer is if you have to go to court, so if you have to go to court because of the suing and the stuff like that, and you have lost wages, because so this happened to my brother, actually. There was a kid on the playground and he was like on the monkey bars, and the kid was sitting on the monkey bars like this. So his legs were dangling, and some kids grabbed onto this leg, some other kids grabbed onto this leg, and he crushed his genitals. And the mom sued everybody, the school, the kids that were named as being under the monkey bars, the teacher on duty, everybody. And my brother was named in the suit, and my dad ended up clearing his name and stuff. But had my dad had to go to court for that, because vicarious liability says you're responsible for your children, which is another thing coverage E covers. So if we were sued for that, and the judge did say that my brother owed this kid money, coverage E would pay for that up to the limit. Now, another thing though that we're referring to is if you have to go to court to defend yourself, you're missing wages, your homeowners will pay you up to $250 a day of lost wages. So that's part of the supplementary coverage on your homeowners, is that you can get up to $250 a day in lost wages if you are going to court. And again, this money that you're getting for going to court, the $250 a day of lost wages, and the money for the lawyer, the cost to defend you, is in addition to E. And then at the same time, also, this ends when the limit ends when the money is gone. So whatever limit they have, and there's no limit to memorize, so we're not going to mention one, is whatever that money is. If they, let's say they had $100,000 for the lawyer and they spent it all, but you're still in the middle of court, there's no judgment, the insurance pulls out, we're done. The limit is over. Our duty, and the way that they say it, the duty to defend ends when the money ends. When the money is gone, when the limit available for this coverage is gone, when they have spent whatever they have declared as the limit is gone, their duty to defend you ends. Basically, it's saying we only have to defend you until there is as much money as is available. We only have to defend you for as much money as is available. Okay. All right. So then the next coverage over here under section 2, homeowners, is known as coverage F. And this one is for friends. What color have we not used? I think kind of that middle between, yeah, that one. Yes. So this one is F, and F is known as medical payments, And this one is not at fault, not at fault. And when we say not at fault, we're just saying you're not admitting you're at fault. You may be at fault, but you're not admitting it. No one's making you say it. You're not declaring it. And that's what we want to remember on the exam, is that it's not at fault. You're not admitting fault. And in fact, you're kind of almost saying I'm guilt-free, and yet I paid you money. So clear me of any wrongdoing. I'm in no way wrong. I'm in no way wrong because look, I'm not even guilty and I'm paying you money. Coverage F is kind of like a good neighbor kind of thing. And I would think of like, it's kind of like, well, it's not my fault that this happened, but I feel bad that it happened at my house. That's kind of like what it's for. And also, like, if you're just throwing a kid's birthday party, you know, your friend comes over and your kid knocks into her kid or whatever, you feel bad, you have coverage for that. You have that on your homeowners. And that's what medical payments is for. You can pay for that. So if you know, that does happen, your friend's kids come over, your kids knock into their kids being kids messing around, it happens. You literally have coverage on your homeowners to pay for that. And that's under medical payments. So, and they usually will abbreviate it as med pay. So just be prepared to see medical payments, med pay as the same. A big key thing is not at fault. You are not admitting fault. That is definitely a testable point for medical payments. And then medical payments is usually a lot smaller than liability, where liability is that minimum $100,000. Medical payments is like 3,000, 5,000, maybe 10,000. It's a much smaller dollar amount than you're going to get for liability. And again, we want to think of friends on this one. Like, friends won't sue you, but they would like some money to go to the ER. That's what F is for. Now, F has a couple of things that we want to make note of. So we're going to just talk right now about medical payments. Okay, so this is talking about important things about medical payments. One is that on a homeowners, it's for others. It's for other people. And we know that because it's section 2 liability, which is other people, but we need to make note of that because on an auto policy, on a PAT, a personal auto, and if you're taking the full property and casualty exam or personal lines or casualty exam, you would need to know this. Personal auto med payments is for you and your people. and this is something you need to be aware of, the difference of this, that medical payments on an homeowners is for other people, guests, relatives, visiting relatives, maybe. Yeah, visiting relatives is fine. Because they don't live there. Maybe, I don't know. Actually, hang on. Let's delete that I even said that, because they're not even going to ask you that. Resident relatives are covered. If they ask about residents living at your resident relatives, like if I live at my sister's house, is my stuff covered? And yes, it is, as long as I live there and I reside there. But if I'm just visiting and my stuff burns in a fire, it's not covered. Sometimes they have coverage for guests, but there's rules about it. But it's not just like if my stuff was stolen out of my car while I'm visiting my sister, her homeowners isn't going to cover it. And her liability for me wouldn't follow me. Okay, so personal auto is you and your, so med payments on homeowners is for other people. On a PAP, it's for you and your people. So that's just a little tangent there. Some other things that we need to know about medical payments is that you may, the insurer can request medical exams. The insurer can, or a better way to say it is the insured may submit to medical exams, or the claimant. How do we want to say this? The injured party, there we go, blah, blah, injured party. The injured party may need to do medical exams. The injured party may need to do medical exams, okay? When medical payments is not meant for like pain and suffering, it's not meant for mental anguish. Liability can cover that as part of special general damage. Pain and suffering, mental anguish is known as general damage, and liability can cover that. Medical payments is not into that. Medical payments is medical payments. There must be a doctor bill. There must be a dollar sign. Not a dollar sign, an actual specific out-of-pocket cost. There has to be a bill for medical payments to pay out. It is not for pain and suffering. So in order for it to pay out, the injured party may need to do medical exams. And that is true for a personal auto too. In fact, everything about medical payments from home and auto is true with each other than the you and the your and the other people. That's the one difference between a homeowners and an auto. Everything else is the same with medical payments. So everything else is the same between home and auto when it comes to medical. All right, a couple of other things about medical payments. So one, homeowners is for other people, guests, visitors. Injured party may need to do medical exams as often as the insurer requests. So however often they request that you get examined to confirm that you need medical payments, then you have to do that. It is good for 3 years. Good for 3 years. So like, let's say that you fell down the stairs at your friend's house. They're giving you medical payments. You go to the chiropractor once a week. It's $100 copay. You can submit that $100 copay for 3 years, up to 3 years. But then after that, they're done paying. And then one more final thing on a homeowners, especially, it works, covers the nanny. Covers the nanny. And what we mean here, and I use nanny because that's the example they tend to use, but what it really is a resident employee. So I'm going to make a little note here. A resident employee. And a resident employee doesn't mean they live there. It just means that their job is your house. A resident employee can get med pay, and they can be covered by med pay. You're going to say, what do you, isn't covered by med pay mean they can get med pay? How are these two separate things? A resident employee is like a nanny. Nanny tends to be the one example they use a lot for resident employee. She can get med pay and she can be covered by med pay. She gets to double dip. The nanny can double dip on coverage E, or yeah, F. The nanny double dips on coverage E. Double dip. F, gosh darn it. Double dip on coverage F. What do I mean by that? Let's say you've got a nanny. She's with your child. She is at the park. She is sitting on the bench watching your child on the monkey bars. She sees that your kid is about to slip and fall. So she stands up and is running over to try and catch your child. When she pops up and it begins running, some stranger child, some other child who is on the playground comes also running, and the nanny and the stranger kid hit each other, fall down, break their wrist. Your kid falls down, breaks their wrist. 3 people on the ground with a broken wrist. The nanny, the stranger kid, and your kid. Medical, this is a good example of medical payments. Is it really the nanny's fault? No, they ran into each other. But we can say that, that's that good neighbor kind of thing. Not really my fault, but I feel bad. Medical payments. The nanny is vicariously you in this moment because she is taking care of your children. Her doings, her medical payments follows her, so it could pay out. It covers it. She is covered by med pay. So when we say someone is covered by med, like when I say I'm covered by my homeowners, I'm not saying I get med pay. I'm saying if I cause med pay, if my friend comes over to my house, med pay will cover me to pay to my friend. Liability covers me when I am guilty. Like I owe you money when my dog bites you, and I am covered by my insurance because they will pay the bill. So that's what I mean by covered by med pay. Med pay will pay out for her actions. So liability also extends to the nanny as well. Coverage E and F both cover the resident employee. And a resident employee is anybody whose job involves your house, like a personal chef, a gardener, and a nanny tend to be the 3 that I've seen them talk about. But a resident employee is someone whose job involves your house. And in the situation of the nanny, catching your kid at the park, you've got 3 people laying on the ground. The nanny can get med pay herself for her injuries of breaking her wrist. The stranger child can receive medical payments from your policy because the nanny hit him and you are vicariously responsible for the nanny in that moment. Your child, though, will not receive med pay because med pay is not for you. It's for other people. And you includes your children. Like on your homeowners, when it's like you, it's like you, your spouse, and your kids. Like you are all like one. And when we say you, we mean you. So auto is you and your kids would be covered under medical. You would be covered under medical on your auto only. On auto, medical pays to you and your people, but on homeowners, medical is other people. It's in section 2, liability. Liability is other people. Section 1 is me and mine. I'm number 1, me and my stuff. Section 1, section 2 is me and my stuff. Or sorry, section 2 liability is you and your stuff. You and your stuff. Okay. So, and I think that's the last thing with resident and with medical payments. So medical payments, medical exams, good for 3 years, covers the nanny. She can double dip. Not only can she receive the payment, but then also the person that she crashed into can receive the payment. Okay. We have done a very thorough, in-depth coverage of the coverages that are found on both dwelling and homeowners policies. And it's not the coverages that really make a policy different. That's why we did all of these together. The coverages are different between dwelling and home, yes. But when we think about all the policies that are available under dwelling, and we think about all the policies that are available under homeowners, that's what makes them different is not the coverages. What makes them different is the perils. What makes a 2 different from a 3, different from a 5 is the perils. That's what makes a policy different on a homeowners. So we want to come back up here and remind ourselves that perils are the cause of loss. The fire, the lightning, the wind, the hail, the flood, the reason why you file a claim. And your insurance can either be a named peril policy where it names the perils that are covered, and you're only covered if it's named. So if the policy says you are covered for fire, lightning, and internal explosion, you know it's a named peril policy because it's listing what is covered. On the other hand, you can have an open peril policy that is open to every peril. It is open to cover every peril except what's excluded. So there are things that the open peril policy will not cover, and those will be listed as exclusions. And the 2 main exclusions to memorize are earth movement and water damage on all insurance policies. And we know which policies are named because they will be an even number, like a 2, a 4, a 6, or an 8. And with open, we know that they are open because they will be an odd number, like a 3 and a 5. We do have one exception to that. A DP1 is an odd number, but he is a named peril policy. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the different policies to see what makes them different and to learn their names. So we're going to do the dwelling names, the homeowners names, and then the types of policy. Okay, and then I see a question in the chat box. So, okay, and then Liz Bell, did that help with E and F? You had asked the question, we had talked back about liability as being responsible, and your enemy can sue you, and you said, wouldn't that be medical payments too? Are you feeling better about understanding the difference between medical and liability? Okay. All you need to know, this is what matters. In terms of them asking you a scenario question, like your friend came over, this happened, the dog happened, blah, 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 whatever. You just need to find keywords. If the question says you are at fault, you are at fault, or if they use FAULT, or if they use you are guilty, we're going to go with coverage E. We're going with coverage E. If the question says you are not at fault, you are going to choose coverage F. That is the 70%. You may not fully understand how medical is different from liability, but you don't need to be 100% on the exam. You need to be 70%. And if you can get this into your mind, that at fault is coverage E and not at fault is coverage F, as long as you can know to choose coverage F when you see not at fault in the question, perfect. And when you see you are at fault, you are guilty, and you choose coverage E, perfect. That's what you need to do. Does that help you feel better, or does that make sense? Any questions on that? That's the key difference between E and F. At fault, not at fault. Okay. And I'll try to work on some more examples that kind of like show the difference between the two. Okay, and now I wrote that and I got to move it. Oh, shoot. All right, you go over there. Okay. Okay, come back to me, board. It's getting hot. Remind me to turn the screen back on. My computer's getting pretty roasty since it's been flat on the desk for so long. Share screen, share screen. There we go. Okay. Okay, so now we are going to talk about, we talked about the perils, how the perils are what determine if a policy is different, not the coverages. The coverages are generally speaking the same between all the policies with the exceptions of the weird ones, whatever. But it's not about the gold. What the main thing here that I'm trying to say is it's not about the coverages that make a homeowner's different. It's about the peril and the type of home. The perils that are covered and the type of home, the type of dwelling, the type of structure. Is it a single family home or a condo, or is it an old house? That is what will determine the property. So a homeowner's is focused on not only the perils that are covered, but then also the type of structure. Okay, so first we're going to do dwelling policies. So we're doing dwelling policies. What color was dwelling? Dwelling was pink. And we're doing homeowners policies. How owners. Okay, so we're doing dwelling and homeowners. Okay, a dwelling policy comes in three forms. A form is a policy before you buy it. What I mean by that is when you go to buy, let's say you're going to sell somebody a DP1, like they say, I'm going to buy a DP1. Imagine that you buy, you turn behind you and you grab a packet, and that packet is a fully typed up contract on a DP1. And all you have to do is put in their name, their address, and the coverage amounts. That's what we say when it's a policy is a form. A form is a policy before somebody buys it. It doesn't become a policy until someone buys it and puts their name on it. So when we say form, we just mean a blank form ready to become a policy once someone buys it. Okay, so dwelling policy comes with three forms. You have a DP, you have a DP1 known as basic. That's the name of it, DP1 basic. And I'm going to fill in the names just so that I know my space. You have a DP2 known as broad. And you have a DP3 known as special. And these are the names, and you do need to memorize these names. And then you need to memorize what I'm about to teach you. Oh, that didn't work. Everything that I put on my charts are things that I recommend you memorize, which is why I put them on the chart. Okay, a DP1 policy, again, it is the perils that make a policy different. It's the perils that make a policy different. And a DP1 only has three covered perils. And when I say covered perils, we mean perils are the things that trigger the policy to provide coverage. If I have a DP1 on my property, the only thing that will activate the DP1 is fire, lightning, and internal explosion. Fire, lightning, and internal explosion. These are the only covered perils on a DP1 basic. A DP1 basic covers fire, it covers lightning, it covers internal explosion. These are the covered perils. Now, a DP1 is generally purchased by a guy who's not worried about much because he's going to rebuild the house himself. That's who buys a DP1, a basic Bob. He rebuild everything. And that also tells us too something that is crazy about a DP1, because all other policies are pretty much replacement price other than an HOA 2, but a DP1 basic actually for the walls and the roof is going to pay actual cash value, meaning they're going to give you the used value of the wood. So you're not even going to get a full check to be able to rebuild the house, which is why a basic Bob guy would buy a DP1. He's going to do all the repairs himself. He doesn't need to hire a contractor. So he wants the cheapest possible premium, which is why he buys a DP1. Okay, so DP1 pays out actual cash value, and it only pays if a fire, lightning, or internal explosion happens. Any other peril outside of that is not covered. Now, we can add more coverage if we want more perils covered. So if we want more perils covered, if we want more perils, we buy ECP. If we want more perils, we buy ECP. Oh, shoot. All right. I'm just going to erase that because it doesn't matter. I already done ruined it. Okay. If we want more perils, we buy ECP. ECP is known as extended coverage perils. Extended coverage perils. That's what ECP stands for. ECP is extended coverage perils. And what it does is it gives us more perils. It's basically like a package of perils. It's like an add-on, and it gives us more perils. It gives us the perils known as warps. WHARVS. The extended coverage perils gives us warps. ECP gives us warps. We buy ECP. We have to buy extended coverage perils. We have to pay extra money to have extended coverage perils. So you buy the package of perils known as extended coverage perils, ECP, and it gives you warps. And warps is known as wind, hail, aircraft, if an airplane drops on your house, riot and civil commotion, volcano, explosion. It extends it from internal to all explosion, and then smoke. So if I want more than fire, lightning, and internal explosion, I can buy the extended coverage perils, which will give me the perils known as WARVS. We use the acronym of WARVS to help us remember, WHARVES, wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle, explosion, volcano, explosion, smoke. Aircraft and vehicle are same. Like if a car crashes into you, vehicle. How do you spell vehicle? C-L-E, is that right? I don't know. Aircraft or vehicle. If a car crashes in or an airplane falls, that's the aircraft vehicle. And then V is for volcano. Okay, now all of these perils right here. Oh, and one more thing, actually. If I buy ECP, if I buy ECP, I can then buy VMM. And and so again, you have to buy it. So if this, then that. If I bought ECP, I can then also buy VMM. I can't buy VMM alone. I have to buy the extended coverage perils package first, then I am allowed to buy VMM. So when you're sitting there, and VMM is vandalism, VMM, vandalism, malicious mischief. VMM is vandalism and malicious mischief. If I buy ECP, I am then allowed to also buy VMM. And this is known, buying ECP is known as option number 1. Buying ECP and VMM is known as option number 2. So when what we're saying here with all of this, let's kind of recap what is going on here. You have basic Bob come in. He has a rental property. He wants to get it insured. You are explaining to him what is available on his policy. And you explain to him coverage A rebuilds the walls and roof. Coverage B is going to rebuild the shed in the backyard. Coverage C is going to replace your personal contents, which you don't have very much of. So we're only going to put that at a limited amount. You know you have it if you see a premium charge for it. Coverage E is going to pay your fair rental value. If your tenant has to leave due to a fire or a covered loss, then we will pay your missed rent money. E will pay for your hotel, but you don't need that because you're not living at the property. And so we won't endorse coverage E on your DP1. Now, these are all the coverages that are available. What will cause these coverages to pay out is fire, lightning, and internal explosion. These are the only 3 things that your policy will cover, will cause it to pay out to rebuild it if fire, lightning, and internal explosion happens. Anything else happens to your house, like wind or hail or vandalism, will not be covered, because the only 3 coverages on a DP1 are fire, lightning, and internal explosion. Now, if you are interested, we can boost your coverage to what I like to call option 1. Option 1 is where you are going to buy more perils than the fire, lightning, and internal explosion. It's called the extended coverage perils, and it's going to give you the perils known as WARFs, which is wind, hail, aircraft. If the plane or vehicle crashes into it, riot, people are rioting in your neighborhood, they break the windows with the baseball bats, flip your car over, that would be auto, but riot is the breaking the windows with the baseball bats, throwing the Molotov cocktails, whatever, all that ruins your house. Riot is covered. Volcano is covered. Explosions are covered. Now we're moving from, instead of just internal, to all explosions will now be covered, and any smoke damage to your house if you were to buy option 1. Now, since we're already talking about option 1, option 2, that one is going to give you even more coverage, known as VMM, vandalism and malicious mischief. And if anybody does vandalize the house unrelated to a riot, you would need to have this coverage in order for that to be covered. Otherwise, this will have to be an out-of-pocket expense to you. So we can add either option 1 and give you just the extended coverage perils known as WARFs, or we can add VMM as well with option 2 and make sure that if any vandals cause problems to the house, we can get that repaired quickly for you. That is a DP1. Okay. So all the coverages are the same, A, B, C, D, E has to be endorsed, but all the coverages are the same between the dwellings. What makes the dwellings different is the perils, and these are the perils on a DP1. Now, to confuse us, the insurance companies will call all of these perils basic perils. They call all of those perils basic perils. Now, again, you have to buy the extended coverage and you have to buy the VMM to get it on a DP1. But these are all the basic perils. So they abbreviate all of these as basic perils. But you only get fire, lightning, and internal explosion unless you add ECP and you add VMM. So they're all basic, but you have to add them extra. It's like if you go to McDonald's and they charge you extra money for the cream and extra money for the sugar. Basic Bob, he likes to drink his coffee, you know, black. And so he ordered, he's simple. It's simple. I want coffee, flavored coffee. But if you do happen to get a guy who likes a little cream and sugar, you know, they might want to add the extended coverage or the VMM. And that's what we're offering here. All of this is basic. Cream and sugar is pretty basic coffee. You know, it's more like Starbucks and mocha frappuccinos or whatever that starts getting into the broad and the special. But anyway, DP1, these are all known as basic perils. Now, the reason why we're mentioning that now is because we're going to start talking about a DP2. And a DP2 policy, now we know that it is also named perils in the same way that a DP1 is named perils, which is an exception to the even and odd rule. Even is named perils, open is odd perils, or odd is open perils, except a DP1 is named. A DP2 is also named perils. And now, instead of talking about basic perils, we're going to talk about broad form perils. Broad form perils. Because they are on the broad form. They call them broad form perils because they're on the broad form. HO2 broad. HO2 broad. HO2 broad. Broad form perils. Now, broad form perils are all the basic perils. All the basic perils. Plus. So a DP2, again, coverages are the same. A, B, C, D, same. What makes a policy different is the perils. And a DP2 is adding, automatically including way more perils than a DP1. A DP1 will only have fire, lightning, and internal explosion. For extra money, you can add the ECP. For extra money, you can add the VMM. A DP2 will automatically have all of those. All the basic perils are automatic to a broad. And then we are adding the perils known as B, ice, golf. B, ice, golf. We are adding those perils. And I meant to do this in different colors, but broad form perils. I'm going to go ahead and fix it now. Broad form perils. And I'm probably giving you a chance to catch up if you happen to be writing the notes. A DP2, the basic perils are automatic to a broad policy. So broad perils includes all basic perils and adds the perils known as B, ice, golf. Now, like I said, want you to memorize the things I write. I am not going to write down all of these perils because you don't need to have them all memorized. Okay, we're going to talk about the ones you should memorize. Okay, we're going to save your brain space. So a DP2 is a broad perils policy. And it's going to provide a lot more coverage than the DP1. And when we say coverage, we mean perils triggering. Coverage is the same. A, B, C, D is the same. When we say it broad is going to cover more, we mean triggered more. It is more sensitive to the problems that can happen to the house. So a DP2 broad will trigger to pay out if any of the basic perils happen. Those are automatically covered on a DP2. And then the DP2 includes even more perils known as BBB ice golf. Now the B's are known as bursting. So just think, if they say bursting of this, bursting of that, just go with it. Say, yeah, okay, it's covered because it's a DP2. It's got bursting something. Then C is collapse. And what you want to know about that one is if it's hidden from view. Hidden from view. If you have vermin or dry rot, and it's the reason, and vermin is like termites, animals, bugs that are destroying the house. If you have termites, animals, vermin, or dry rot that is causing the house to collapse, it's only covered if you didn't know about it. If you knew about it, you should take care of it. You should have gotten Terminator Terminex to come take out. Like, that's part of being a homeowner, is taking care of stuff like that. But if it was hidden from view, you didn't know about it, then insurance will cover collapse. Oh, did my marker? Yeah. Oh, but I'm charged, I think. I think I took my plug out, but it looks like we're charged. Okay, I thought there was a flash of you're not being charged. Okay. Anyway, so collapse is hidden from view. G is glass. We're covering glass now. Glass is covered on a broad policy. And then F is freezing. Freezing. And we need to make a big note about freezing. Big note about freezing is that freezing is only covered. Freezing is only covered if the insured took steps to maintain heat in the house. Freezing is only covered if the insured took steps to maintain heat in the house. So what we're saying here is if you have a claim, so if you're going out of town and it's in the middle of winter, you're in Michigan, it's super freezing, snow everywhere, you're going to go to Florida to have a vacation. You're like, well, I'm not going to be here, so I'm going to leave the heat off. I don't need to have the heat running. No one's going to benefit from it. You leave, the heat is off, the pipes freeze, they burst because freezing water expands. It makes itself bigger when it freezes. It bursts your pipes. Then the water unfreezes and then floods your house, floods your living room, and you come home to a big old puddle. There will be zero coverage for you. If you did leave the thermostat on to a temperature to prevent the pipes from freezing, you would be covered. You have to have taken steps to maintain heat. Now, if you did that, you left the thermostat running, but then the power went out and it turned the thermostat off and you were out of town, and that's why they froze, that would be covered because you did try. You tried to maintain steps. As you have to have tried is the point here with freezing. And they love to ask about that. And so freezing is covered on every policy except a DP1, because every other policy has, well, actually not an HOA, but they won't ask you that. Freezing is only covered if the insured took steps to maintain the building. So any policy they ask you about with freezing, you had to have taken steps. If they ask about a DP1 in freezing, because there's an F in there. No, there is no F in Warbs, is there? There is no F. There There's no F in a fire. Fire is covered, but there's no freezing in wharves. There's no freezing in wharves. And there's one other thing. Definitely want to mention too about earth, because they love to ask this on a DP1. So we're going to make a little note here about fire. Oh, I meant to do fire color. Fire on a DP1 is always covered. And we want to think about that in terms of it's always covered, but we want to attach that idea to even after earth movement. Even from earth movement. If you have an earthquake that causes a fire, because things shaking and breaking can cause a fire, the resulting fire is covered. So we would say the resulting fire is covered. I'm going to zoom into this so you guys can see it better. Even from earth movement. So fire on a DP1 is covered. Even from earth movement, the resulting fire is covered is how they're going to say it. The resulting fire is covered. So they might give you like a little, they might give you a question. So this is an example question right here. They will say you had a earthquake cause $600 or $6,000 in damage, and it led to a fire which caused $2,000 in damage. How much will the insurer pay? How much will the insurer pay? And the answer is going to be the fire only. So if an earth movement causes a fire, the earth movement not covered, the fire is. And they will pay for the damage of the fire, but they will not pay for the damage of the earth movement. And they like to ask about that on a DP1 because we always think DP1 hardly covers anything, probably not covered. Earth movement is excluded. But fire is always covered, even if coming from earth movement, even on a DP1. Question. So for homeowners, are these the same perils that will trigger a coverage? Yes, because all homeowners are broad and up. So when we're talking, homeowners is also broad form. HO2 broad, HO4 broad form, HO6 broad form, HO8. Well, HO8 is it's like a DP1 with warps. That's what an HO8 is. But broad form perils, these are the same perils that are covered on a homeowners. Yes, starting from a 2 up, pretty much. Yes, yes. Homeowners uses broad form, and we'll talk more about that. Once we start talking about homeowners, like we'll barely like our conversation. Once I'm done, it's gonna take me about 3 minutes to talk about a DP3, about 10 minutes to talk about homeowners, and that's it. The homeowners won't need this peril conversation because broad form is what covers most homeowners, and then special. And so there's not, because they're all the same perils, there's not much more we need to learn. Commercial even has these same perils. Commercial covers all these same perils. There's a basic commercial, a broad commercial, and a special commercial. You now know, multiple answers to commercial because you know basic, broad, and special. Basic, broad, and special exists on dwelling and commercial. There's no basic homeowners other than an HO8, I guess you could say, but it's not named basic. It's named modified. Okay, anyway, so DP1 is limited perils, fire, lightning, internal explosion. For additional money, you would have to add the extended coverage perils known as WARFs. That will give you wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle explosion, smoke. If you buy the extended coverage perils for additional money, you can buy VMM, vandalism and malicious mischief. That is option 2. And all of those perils on the DP1 are automatically included on a DP2. And then in addition to the basic perils, the broad will also include the perils known as BBB ice golf. And if you can read through this list a few times in your online text, great. But mostly memorizing the acronym will help you recall what they may be. But remember, bursting is covered. So if they mention anything bursting, heating systems bursting, washer bursting, that's covered. Collapse if it was hidden from view, glass is covered. And then freezing is only covered if the insured took steps to maintain heat in the house. And that is known as a broad form policy. All right, now we're going to talk about the last type of dwelling, which is very special. Its name is special. A DP3 is special, and it's not letting, there we go. Okay, I didn't move you far enough. Okay, DP3 special. What makes it special is that it is odd. It is open. It will cover any peril that happens to it, unless it's excluded. So that's what makes a DP3 special, because I'm kind of running out of space here. I'm getting more lazy with my drawing. DP3, what makes it special is that it is open peril. Open peril, meaning it covers everything not excluded. Covers everything not excluded. Covers everything not excluded, okay? Now, with a DP3, what also makes it special is that it's only open peril on the outside. So one way that we can think of a 3 is it's open if we have a house with a 3. What we're saying here is that the walls and the roof, the outside, the walls and the roof, the outside, the walls and roof, that is open peril. And so we're saying coverage A is open. So coverage A is dwelling. Coverage A is dwelling. And on a 3, it is open peril. Coverage A on a dwelling is open peril. On the inside of the house, it is actually named. This is coverage C. It is named peril. Named peril. A 3 is unique. A 3 is unique. When we learn homeowners, we're going to learn 2, 3, and 5. And an HO2 is the same as a DP2, and an HO3 is the same as a DP3, except now it's homeowners instead of dwelling. And an HO3 behaves the same way a DP3 does. Open on the outside, the walls and the roof have open peril coverage, but the stuff inside, the clothes, the sewers, the furniture, is a named peril following broad form. It follows broad form. Basically, an HO3 is HO3 on the outside, but HO2 on the inside. We're saying that the coverage of your stuff, your clothes, your shoes, your furniture, it is covered according to the broad form perils found on an HO2. So it's like HO2 on the inside, or a DP2, HO2, whatever one we're talking about. DP2 on the inside, DP3 on the outside, named on the inside, open on the outside. A 5 on a homeowners is open, all the way open. So it's open on the walls and the roof, and it's open on the stuff inside. It's the only one that's like that. So a 3 with a homeowners is like right in the middle of a 2 and a 5. It's open like a 5 on the walls and the roof, but it's named on the inside. So with a DP3, it is special. It is open peril. It covers everything not excluded. DP3 special covers everything not excluded. And that is referring to the walls and the roof, coverage A, but coverage C is named peril, and it's going to follow the broad form. Basically, the only way you can have coverage for your clothes, your shoes, your furniture is if one of the perils from a DP2 happens. It's a broad form. It's following broad form perils. So coverage C on an DP3 is broad form perils. So make sure you put C here, contents, broad perils. It is named perils, right? But broad form is named perils when you think about it. It's the policy that names them. So it's specifically the broad form name peril, because there's basic named and broad named. So contents follows the broad form. It follows an HO2. They like to ask questions that compare the 2 and the 3. They'll say, how is the HO2 different from the HO3? Or how is the HO2 the same of the HO3? What's different between a 2 and a 3 is that coverage A is named on 2 and open on 3. What is the same between an HO2 and an HO3 is that the contents on a 2 is named and the contents on an HO3 is named. Okay. All right, now we're going to move into homeowners. So we're doing a homeowners chart over here. So homeowners is going to have two things. They're going to have a name. Well, we can do, yeah, they're going to have a name. And they're going to have like a type of construction almost. I don't know if that's going to be big enough. They're going to have a name. And then they're going to have a number. Yeah, well, no, yeah, name. Yeah, okay, sorry. So let's do, so you have a HO2, HO3, and HO5. And the name of each one is broad. So sorry, we have, it's number, name, type, number, name, and then type. Okay, so HO2 broad, HO3, I'm pretty sure I did the colors right, special, and HO5 comprehensive. And these are the names of the policies. That's the name. Now, the type that it covers is just a regular house. So there's nothing special about it. It's like a regular house, not a condo. It's not an old house. It's just a regular house, a 2, a 3, and a 5. And the HO2 is broad form perils. The HO3 is special perils. And the HO5 is also special or open, special and open, open, special, special, open, comprehensive, special, open. Yes. And then there's one other thing too now. When it comes to homeowners, when we think of broad form perils, so broad form, remember broad form is basic, which remember basic includes fire, lightning, internal explosion, wharves, known as the ECPs, and VMM. So broad form is basic plus BBB ice golf. Now that it's homeowners, it also includes theft. That's a new addition to homeowners. Dwelling doesn't cover theft of personal property because, again, remember, usually it's a tenant living in the house, not the landlord. But theft on a dwelling would need to be added. And there's an endorsement called broad theft endorsement, and it has a lot of limitations. But on a homeowner's, theft is automatic. We do have some limitations, like we talked about the theft of gun, the theft of jewelries, things like that. But theft is now included on homeowners where it wasn't before. But everything else we know about broad from a dwelling is true, that it is basic perils known as the fire, lightning, internal explosion, wharfs, and VMM. And then we add the BBB ice gulf, the bursting of systems, collapse, glass, and freezing if we took steps to maintain the heat. Everything we learned about broad is true. Now we're just securing that the name of an HO2 is broad. HO3 special, every peril covered, not excluded. It will cover every peril not excluded. And that is the HO3. And we could also make sure that we remember with the HO3 that it is special in that coverage C is going to be following broad form perils, broad form. And you also want to remember named. You have to remember both. Coverage C is broad form and named perils. And then on an HO3, coverage A is open perils. And that's what makes a HO5 comprehensive, is that it is open, 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 open. That A is open and C is open. So on an HO5, the walls and the roof are named or open peril. Anything that happens to the walls and the roof is covered. And then a coverage C, contents, is also open peril, which means you have mysterious disappearance on your contents inside your house. So if you were to mysterious disappearance is I lost my jewelry. I can't find it. It may have been stolen. I had a party. Some people were over. I may have lost it. I can't find it. I don't know. But it's just gone. It's mysteriously gone. And HO5 will cover mysterious disappearance, whereas no other policy will. And that comes from the fact that it's open perils. So that is either an HO2, an HO3, or an HO5. Then you have an HO4. And our HO4 is also broad form, but the name of it is actually content, or renter. They're going to call it renter's insurance. Renters. And our memory trick here is for rent, The HO4 is for rent. And the name and the type is honestly the same. That HO4 is a renter's policy. It's the name and the type all in one. Now an HO4 is renters. What we're saying here is it's contents only. Contents only. And that means that an HO4, when you look at an HO4 and you've got coverages A, B, C, D, E, and F, there actually is no A and B. It starts at C. That's what contents only is saying. There is no dwelling coverage. There's no shed coverage because a renter doesn't own the building. So an HO4 will start at coverage C, and C becomes the main coverage. That's the main coverage on an HO4. So when they say like trees, we talked about how trees on a homeowner's is $500 per tree, up to 5% of A. On a renter's, it's actually 10% of C. They're less likely to ask you that. It's much more important to remember 5% of A than it is 10% of C for renters. But I'm just putting it out there. If you do have that brain space, memorize it. If not, don't worry about it. The 70% is remembering that trees are 5% of A on homeowners. And this is true actually for an HO6 as well. So this is true for a 4 and a 6, because a 6 is called, so then we have an HO6, An HO6 is named condo, and that's also the name and the type as well. It's a condominium. A condominium is where there is a building with multiple units in it, and your customer owns one unit and he's going to get the HO6. Now, the HO6 is unique because the person who owns the building, they will rebuild the building. What is happening with the HO6 is that this is just the upgrades. It's the upgrades between the basic rebuild and what your unit owner actually has. So let me explain what I mean. A condo is, like I said, a big old building. Someone owns the building and then little individuals own the unit. It's like an apartment, but each apartment is individually owned. So the person who owns the building will rebuild the building fully and completely if it burns down. But they're going to rebuild each unit of the condo to like the basic minimum, the cheapest flooring, the cheapest countertops, the cheapest paint when the building owner rebuilds it. Your HO6 is what will pay the difference between the cheap flooring and whatever flooring you have. So if you have, if the HO6, if the condo building owner puts carpet, but you have wood, your condo building, the whole building owner, he would put up, $3,000 to get the carpet. Your HO6 would add on the extra 3 to boost it up to wood. Like the HO6 is for upgrades. So on an HO6, your coverage A is actually pretty limited. It's only it's $1,000 minimum, but you increase it according to your upgrades. So they would just ask you, like when I sold an HO6 policy, I would ask them, what kind of countertops do you have? What kind of flooring do you have? What kind of cabinets do you have? I would ask them these questions to determine how much coverage A should be. Now, at a minimum, it wasn't 1,000. Like that's the lowest you could have on your HO6 is 1,000. But you just added more according to what they needed. Now, another weird thing about an HO6 is that B is added to A if needed. Added to A if needed. What we mean by that is it is generally unlikely that you own a shed when you live in a condo building. Like having sheds out here for each of the unit owners would be a little silly, but it is possible. Sometimes, they have garages and stuff. So if you do have an other structure on an HO6, we can't take 10% of 1,000. So instead of having this be a percent, they simply just say, how much do you need? Put it in A. So if you only needed 1,000 for, the better paint, like maybe you do have the cheap model anyway, and if it burns down, you're fine with the cheap model. So you have A at 1,000, but then you do have a shed that is 10,000, then B, you would increase A to B. You would make A 11,000. You would leave 1,000 for A plus 10,000 for the shed. So A would be listed as 11,000. It will include the money for the shed in A. So there's add B to A if you need it. And then again, the main coverage in a condo will become contents, just like renters, which is why tree coverage on a 4 and a 6 is 10% of C, whereas the other policies are 5% of A. All right, the one last policy we're going to talk about is an HO8. An HO8. Now, an HO8's name is modified. That's like its name. I'm not saying the name is modified. Not modifying the name. The name itself is modified. Dude, where's my car? Sweet. Sorry. That's what made me think of right then and there. Okay, sorry. That's a movie reference in case you don't know. HO8 is named modified and the type is old house. So the type is older house. Now it's not always an older house, but that's usually the examples they're going to give you, which is why I put it in there. The main thing about a HOA is that market value is less than, this means less than rebuild. Market value is less than rebuild. What we mean by that is if you were to go buy an HOA, if I were to go buy an HOA in Michigan, or if I were to go buy a house, I'm not buying an HOA. I'm going to go buy a house. And in the state of Michigan, there you can buy a house for so cheap, comparatively speaking to everywhere else. And many times you get a house for cheaper than what it would be to build it, which is what we're saying here. Market value is what a willing seller or what a willing buyer would pay a willing seller. An HOA modified policy is when the market value, which is what a willing buyer would pay a willing seller, is less than rebuild. If market value could be, you could get that house for 100,000, but the rebuild, if we were to try to build it again, if the whole house burned down, we had to build it again, it would be 250,000. Insurance companies don't like that because you only paid for 100,000, but they have to pay 250 if it burns down. They're not a fan of that, which is why they modify the policies. And what they're modifying on the HOA is they're giving it pretty limited perils. You're going to get kind of limited perils on an HOA. In fact, you're going to get basic, like you're getting the basic. It's what the easiest way to memorize it, honestly, when we think of limited perils, is it's a DP1 with wharfs. It's a DP1 with wharfs. That's what we're getting on the HOA. We're getting fire, lightning, internal explosion, and wharfs. There's no BBB ice golf on an HOA. There's no BBB ice golf. And we need to know that there is a big limitation on theft. There is limited theft coverage. Limited theft. What they limit is that one, it's limited to $1,000 and on premise only. On premise only. Okay, what we're saying here. Remember when we drew out coverage C and we said it's your clothes, it's your shoes, it's your pots, it's your pans, it's your TV, it's your DVD, it's your CD players, it's your forks, it's your spoons, it's your plates, it's everything. Coverage C covers all of that, including theft of all of that on your homeowners, but not an HOA. HOA says no matter what was stolen, no matter how much was stolen, $1,000. And one of the reasons for that, to help us understand that, is when you look at a house where the market value is less than rebuild, it's generally because it's in a scary neighborhood where people feel unsafe. There might be a lot of robberies. So you're more likely to have thefts and break-ins when you have an HOA. So they modified the theft to $1,000 on premise only. And what we're saying here with this on premise only thing is if I have an HO4 or a 6 or a 2 or a 3 or a 5, and I have a backpack with my laptop for work, and I go to Starbucks and someone steals that laptop fully covered under a 2, a 3, a 5, a 4, a 6, on an 8, zero coverage. An 8 says that the theft had to occur at the property in order for it to be covered. It had to have been from the house in order for it to be covered. The one final thing that is modified on the HOA is that it is $250 for trees. Every other homeowners is $500. Even dwelling is $500. DP2 and 3. A DP1 is $0 on trees. Trees. I do have a tree video that I just released on YouTube, so feel free to watch that. But a DP1 is $0 for trees. and DP2 and all others. Basically a DP2 on. When I think of homeowners, I think of them getting better and better as you go, like a DP2 and then a DP3, HO2, HO4, HO6. So when I say all others, I mean that it's 500. And then you have an HO8, which is 250. So again, watch the YouTube video on trees to get more detail, but we wanted to I want to at least plug that in right here, that trees are limited. Oh, I did it right here. Trees are limited to 250. Okay, so again, coverages are generally the same. Coverage A, B, C, D. What makes the homeowners different is the perils that it covers and the type. And we did a pretty huge lesson today on homeowners and dwelling, and we are done for the day. Again, not all encompassing, but focusing on a lot of the major stuff that you're going to see on your exam. And yeah, any questions? You can unmute or chat. Thank you so much. You are so welcome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you everybody for watching. Sending you all the love to pass your exam.